And that's basically reserves and fund balance. So the total amount is about $50 million, but this is the way it's broken down. And it's hard to see this, but I just wanted to put it up just for, as a hypothetical example. We have a fiscal advisor that helps us kind of forecast any borrowing that we're going to do. And she came up with a schedule, and what that schedule basically represents is the importance of not having to borrow money and building a capital reserve. So what this represents is about $189,000 in interest costs for every $1 million that's borrowed over a 15-year period. So by saving that $9.1 million, we're actually avoiding any interest costs in the event that we needed to do a bond. And I just want to read to you what the controller says about the use of fund balance. He says, start the fiscal year with sound, conservative estimates of revenues and expenditures. Enact a structurally balanced budget that limits the use of one shot, which is using reserves for non-recurring revenue, except to fund non-recurring or capital expenditures. So what he's saying is, you don't want to use your reserves to pay for expenditures that are going to happen each year, because that's one-shot money, and then you start drawing down on it. He said, keep an adequate, unrestricted fund balance available to manage risks and help avoid year-end deficits. I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Sanchez, Dr. Sanchez.
So these are just really important dates. Just want to remind everyone that this is a budget process and that we have a number of dates set aside to engage in conversations. Tonight being a major discussion that we're embarking on, and then on Saturday, September 7th, we've termed it all day Saturday, but it's actually probably a few hours on Saturday to discuss our curriculum budget and various other lines of the budget. Then we return on the 11th, the 25th, and then we conclude, obviously, on May 19th, where the budget is voted upon and the Board of Elections also takes place. All that to say is that there should be an asterisk should there be additional dates that the Board of Education should request to continue our discussions with our community or amongst themselves. We certainly are amenable to adding them, and we'll add them as such. We do an important date that's not noted in here is April 1st. That is basically all these projections, revenue, and everything else associated with what Alita had shared are based on the governor's budget. The state budget has not yet been finalized. That normally, if all goes well, takes place on April 1st. Then thereafter, we'll have our official numbers, which can help us in finalizing some of the decisions that we have relative to our school district budget. So with that, I'm going to thank you, and I'm going to invite our, sure, I'll pause for questions before I turn it over to Mike. Excuse me, Mike, sorry.
Just want to open up to board members for any questions for Dr. Sanchez or Ms. Alita Zuber. Actually, I have a question. Alita, with the savings for the double boilers, weren't the expectation was that the price of oil that we were going to use was going to go up, so it's defrayed some of the cost?
Right.
Isn't that the reasoning behind it?
Yes.
Even though it was flat,
We primarily use gas.
Right. Okay. So
And we were using just oil back then.
right.
And the oil that we were using was very viscous and viscous and very expensive.
Right.
And gas is much cheaper.
Okay,
But we
great.
have the ability to go back and forth.
Right. And then we have hired a consultant to take a look at our utility bills, right, to see if there's some savings, but will we know that in terms of analyzing if we've been overbilled?
We did that as a telephone audit, and there wasn't a lot of identified savings. I want to say it was maybe a couple of $1,000. So we've been, the Benny project. Sorry. sorry.
It's good that we saved a couple.
So there's a
Separate.
couple of audits, but the audit that you're talking about, yeah, we are working with a consultant that's supposed to help us and go around the district and basically monitor our energy management systems to determine if anything is failing or if it could be used more efficiently, and helping staff members change their behaviors to help reduce some of our usage as well.
Great.
So let me also add that, and I'm going to ask our Director of Facility, Jared Mays, to speak later on during his presentation. We actually, related to energy, we recently took place, or he attended the session that the county held regarding use of solar energy. So I've asked him later on during his presentation, since he's here, to kind of give an update. Both our town and village were also in attendance, and the district, so to mean what it really means for us and what at this time he's recommending as we proceed and go forward. So he'll share a little bit more during his presentation. I've asked him at the end.
I have a few questions. First, thank you for going to that. My car broke down, so I couldn't go. So I'm glad somebody went. None of these questions have to be answered today. I just wanted to throw them out there. The additional sales tax that we're getting, where is that being allocated? Like in the next few weeks or whatever, would you be able to tell us where in the budget that sales tax revenue, the additional one, is going to?
It's general fund revenue, so what probably is going to happen, because we didn't budget for that revenue in this 2019-20 budget, is that it'll fall to fund balance. So we'll have additional money left over, because again, we didn't account for that, because at the time we developed the budget, the law hadn't passed. So what's probably going to happen is it's going to fall to fund balance.
So that money can be used to offset some of the 1.51% tax levy increase, right?
That would be a decision by the board.
But potentially.
Potentially, yes.
And if the state only says we should have 4%, or their recommendation is 4% in reserves, I just want to entertain the conversation at some point. Again, doesn't have to be today, about bringing that number back down to 4. Below 4 is obviously going to be unhealthy for our finances, but at 6%, I think that number is a little bit high. And I think we should have that discussion at some point of bringing it back down to 4, again, to try to offset that 1.51% tax levy increase on our taxpayers, homeowners, and renters through the transitive property. I also wanted to know how much money neighboring districts keep in their CERT fund. And again, I know this is just a question I came up with now, so I don't expect you to have the answer for the next, again, few weeks, month, whatever. If you could find out how much they have, neighboring districts or districts similar to us as well in population, that would be much appreciated. Question for Dr. Sanchez about the renovation of the library. Why do we need to renovate the library? Or what would we do differently that isn't here now?
Yeah, so first of all, within the context, I'll just give general sense, and then we'll kind of give you more details and want to speak to our facility subcommittee. We just looked at some plans just recently that we didn't have a chance to meet this week. Overall, we're looking at spaces that our students to utilize to consider the different needs of our students when they enter this space. This has become a space where students just congregate and not necessarily are used for, it becomes very challenging because of just the lack of flexible space at the high school. So this is where they come, right? And they, for lack of a better word, this is where they hang out. Where, when there's programs here, we're shutting down the library. And that precludes students from being able to enter, right? So we have various assemblies. So what we're trying to do with the facility subcommittee is how can we look at this space in a different way so we don't have to shut it down. So that students have quiet spaces to learn if they want to. If we needed a group learning session and kids wanted to work in groups, we can provide some quiet space within here. So really looking very carefully at what that looks like. We've also even considered the possibility of even adding additional square footage within the space here so that we have more students that can utilize this and have greater flexibility within there. I think big overarching look through in terms of our overall focus on space is obviously the function across the district, and as we're looking at facilities, flexibility. It's not so, we want our spaces to be adaptable for the various needs that our staff need it for and our students. and obviously that they're supporting the types of programs that we want to look at. So I'll share more in greater detail, and unfortunately at this point, and I can see where the questions too is, have any physical pictures of what we're proposing just yet. So we hope to before this, and we anticipate having that before the process is over.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then a final question. With a 1.51% tax increase, I calculated a number at $1,548,000 that would be asked for from the taxpayers. Is that roughly in the
Yes.
general area?
Yep.
Okay. So with that $8 million that was in the unrestricted fund, is that already factoring in money that was going to be taken out of the fund balance, or would that?
Right, so the $2.4 million would be taken out of the $8 million.
So it would drop down to
6.
5.66. Okay. And again, at some point, if it were to drop down to that, would you be able to get us the percent that it would then be? Like if it's at 6% right now, if it were to drop 2.4 million, would you be able to get us the exact percent that it would then fall to?
Yes, because it's the percentage of the ensuing year's budget. So yes, I can.
And if you could as well, would you be able to get us a number if we were to take an additional 1.548 million out of that, just to play around with that number and see where we would stand if we were to take that money out of the unrestricted fund?
Let me just say one thing. The money that we're talking about, everything is an estimate at this point. We don't know what fund balance is going to be at the end of the year. The $8 million that's sitting there is based on the budget from last year. So I don't know what I'm assuming that we're going to have $2.4 million to balance the budget, but I can get you those numbers. But I just want you to realize that we don't know what the fund balance is going to be yet. We still have expenses and encumbrances that we have to review, but I can give you some of the information that you're requesting.
Thank you. And just for clarification, when do those numbers usually become final?
Well, they're never final until the audit.
Okay.
But we do estimates throughout the year. So I feel confident that we're going to have 2.4. I'm not worried about it, but it's still an estimate.
And again, that 1.51% increase is not factoring any additional increase in state aid, correct?
It does factor what we got from the governor's budget.
Okay. But not the actual?
I don't know what we're getting from the actual state budget yet, so it doesn't factor in the increases.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so I'm going to turn
I
over.
have some questions.
Go ahead.
Is that okay? Do you have some? Go. Okay. I just wanted to point out, just talking about state aid a little bit, the number, the governor puts out a number at the beginning of each sort of budget cycle.
Right.
We then go through a whole advocacy season process, and we all hold our breath and cross our fingers, and we hope that we eventually get more than the number that he initially puts out. So this budget includes his initial starting number, not any estimate of what we think we might eventually get. And then about the sales tax revenue, that was about 2.7 or 2.8 on the slide. Is that anticipated to be at that level every year going forward? Okay. And then just in terms of maybe explaining the reserves or characterizing them a little bit more, there are really only 2 reserves that give us flexibility to use in terms of plugging a hole or balancing a budget, and that is the unrestricted unappropriated fund balance reserve that was in that slide, $8-something million, and then we also occasionally use some of the tax reduction claim reserve to do that as well if we have years go by where the payouts didn't come to fruition in essence, right? So I know that as the budget season progresses, we're going to take a closer look at that particular reserve in particular. And then just pointing out that maybe you can remind us that we have what appears to be a very large budget, but the vast majority of that is salaries of staff, as well as these various pension expenses and benefits that you discussed. What's that number, like 80% around there?
Yes.
And so I know that we do a lot of grant writing. I know that we have, I think, approximately 36 community partnerships at this point. But funding from those sources, we can't include as those 80% of our operating expenses. That 80% needs to come from the revenue that is raised with the tax levy or state aid. Is that correct, generally speaking?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
So
the question?
what I'm trying to say is you couldn't use a community partnership, for example, or a grant to pay for a math teacher's salary unless that grant was for that particular specific purpose typically.
I mean, you technically could, if the funding came in and an individual said, I want to fund a math teacher. Albeit, I think we always have to be very cautionary, proceed with caution when we do that, because we don't know from year to year if it's going to be available.
Right.
I.e., if you have a one-time allotment, we're also very careful about adding staff and having that being their source of their salary, because the next year you can be accessing that same person. So it might be the right decision and it might not be, but we also want to be very forthright with anyone that comes in to assist them and says, you know, I can't guarantee your position for the following year because, you know, the funding may not be there. So that's just a general piece, like when we have those one-offs or these allotments of funding or grants, we're just very careful about what it means for the long term, you know, so you don't overbuild, because then you might be tearing it down very soon after that. Sometimes grants give you the sort of the seed money to start building, while, you know, you can start to look for other revenue sources and or look at your general fund as a place to maybe eventually support it. Grants give you that opportunity. If something's really successful, I might be coming back to the board and the community and saying, it's too good, we got to include it in our budget. It's a little more complex, and it's not so much a yes or no, it's a maybe for the most part.
Okay.
Yep.
And then just going back to the capital reserve a little bit, that was a reserve that was established by the community as part of the budget vote a few years ago. And that one of the reasons, although not the only reason, but one of the reasons was to potentially lessen the impact or amount of a bond if that discussion happened in the future. And just remind us all, we do have some significant capital improvement projects that the facility committee has been working on and planning that are projects not just for this year, but looking forward.
Yep.
Year 2 and year 3, and the ultimate goal would be using potentially talking about using that capital reserve line in order to fund those particular projects. And then at the same time, you know, that's what you were talking about with the interest fees, the $183,000 of the interest fees, is that money is in the bank now earning us income in interest rather than us taking out a bond and paying the financing fees in order to do that. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that. And then there's always, and one of the reasons why I brought up the significant portion of the budget that is in salaries of staff is that typically the percentage of increase in the salaries increases at a rate that is higher than our tax levy generally. So there's this push and pull between those two numbers every budget season. And it seems like that's some of the reasons why in some years we've said there's a gap here, and in other years we seem to be okay. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that discrepancy a little bit. Not really a question, just kind of pointing that out. And I think that is all I have for today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there a way to get some type of itemized, I guess, list of the grants that we have received and I guess what's still pending out there? Because I think probably one of the reasons it says millions is because there's probably still like some unrecouped grant money out there probably. Or is there a way to kind of get itemized of what exactly we've gotten, what grants we've been awarded, and how much of that we've actually collected to date?
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question about the, as far as the capital reserves, as we start talking about down the road, as we're talking about advancements in energy use and possible changes to that, if any sort of big projects come out of that, would that be coming out of the capital reserves, or is that, like, what kind of project would that?
I'll respond in a little bit to what Ms. Crossling said, and then also in response to your question as well. The Facilities Committee and the board have also, first of all, recommended that we create a master plan, a multi-year plan related to our facilities, so that we look at all the needs across the district, and we've done that. We've really tried to assess. We've worked with our architects. So we look at a multi-year view of how can we start addressing things over time. With that, too, is also the finances associated with it. I think in a previous board meeting, we said that, you know, the rumor out there is that we might go out for a bond, and we don't feel at this point that that's necessary, albeit things could change. But right now, we think through our budget and using the reserves, we're very carefully trying to address those various needs. So at some point, as we sit down around the Capitol, it's more than just creating the plan and saying these are all the facilities items that we want to address. It's also associating a budgetary and a financial plan with that. And that would include what would we address within our budget, how would we start strategically using some of the money that we've allocated in our capital reserve to start funding some of the projects. Now, this budget here does not recommend at this point using the capital reserve. However, futuristically, I'm confident that we're going to begin using it, but we want to be very strategic, and that's discussions that we're having with the facility subcommittee, but also eventually coming to the board and to the community so that they understand what we're looking at and the flow to the work. Give you an example, you know, we're increasing the guidance space, which we feel is important, takes away one classroom here at the high school. We need to think strategically of how do we create music space for the piano instruction that takes place in that room. So if we think of it long-term, we really have some strategy of saying, okay, over time, this room, piano will move into this other space, and all that to say is really just having like a sequence of events across the district and thinking of all 6 schools along the way.
Right. In terms of that, the renovation or the proposed renovation of the library space, is part of that I think before we discuss, part of the contributing factor is the overflow of the cafeteria and basically kids having nowhere to go on their off periods, especially with 9th graders not being able to leave campus, right?
Ossining High School is a real challenge from the perspective of there's no real commons, let's just use that as one space where kids can go to during an off period. This becomes the one space. We have a number of students in our schools, and I'd encourage anyone at any point, and I'm happy to take a photo, to take a look at this library during that period of time. If we shut down this library, it becomes we're compounding the issue for our students. That's why we've started to allocate some, put some comfortable seating in the lobby so our students have these spaces that they can go to. And also, we want to build this sense of community, and that's why we renovated the courtyard also some time ago, I should say, with the help of our community members. During the warm days, our students utilize that. So the answer to that is yes, but also, too, the way our students are learning is very different. So it's not just about creating space, it's really thinking about the instructional practices we want to see in here, i.e., could we have, and I'm just using hypothetically, some space for kids, for, speakers to come in, but utilize it in the upper level in a different way, and still maintain this lower level for students to engage? The answer to be is potentially. And those are things that we're looking at very flexibly with the facility subcommittee. We just got another iteration that we still want to review and get a cost associated with that too.
Thank you.
Quick question about tax certs, if I can. Have you ever seen a year where tax cert claims have been over $1 million?
I don't have that data in front of me, but from my memory, no.
Would it be possible to get us the last 15 to 20 years?
I don't think I can get 15 to 20 years. I can maybe get 10.
10 is fine.
But I'll try to see if I can get further.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I can suggest, because this is presentation number 1, and we have 4 others to go through, and I probably should have set the stage in the beginning as to how we intend to proceed to. So for new board members and current board members, recall, we're going to go line by line in the budget at this point. And I'm going to ask for clarifying questions of Mr. Hanna, Ms. Buzang-Hill, Mr. Minahan, Mr. Mance, to talk about their lines and get some clarity associated with it, and then we'll open it up to questions thereafter their presentations. I want to also keep in mind for the board and for the community that the conversations about reserves, tax certs, everything else associated with it, we will have time and dedicate time in the budget process to do so. But I really want to encourage us to let's hear the whole budget, and then in turn we can begin talking about the finances associated with it as we proceed. It's an important item, and we're not dismissing it, but I want to also be mindful of going through the real details of what this budget actually does recommend and include at this point. And so we just ask you to just kind of keep your notes, ask for clarifying along the way, and then thereafter we'll pause and ask Mr. Anna at the end of his presentation just some details around his budget to clarify, and then similarly with the other administrators, and we'll do that also in Saturday's session as well. I want to get caught up in the finances, obviously that's important, but I also want to get into the instructional programs that this recommends as well. And I'm mindful of the 4 administrators, if that's okay from the board.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay? All right.
Okay. Next presentation. Okay. Presentation of the proposed technology budget. Mr. Michael Hanna.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you tonight about our technology department budget for 2021. I will be speaking about 3 budget lines that make up our technology budget: our research and evaluation, instructional technology, and our central data processing. The technology budget that I will be presenting tonight took months of careful consideration to craft. We have used data analysis, collaborated with building administrators and staff, and brought in outside consultants to look at our infrastructure. My goal was to create a fiscally responsible budget that meets the needs to support and enhance the use of technology throughout the district. The first part of the budget concentrates on the gathering of data from many different sources and how we use that data to make informed decisions and help drive instruction. Continuous assessment throughout the school year allows for more accurate data on student growth and performance, not only through state testing that occurs in March and April, but by using locally constructed tests throughout the year, as well as our benchmarking software that we use K through 11 at this point. We have used a service out of BOCES for our enrollment projections that provide us with future outlook of enrollment, to make decisions on personnel, and to maintain our district and maintaining our appropriate classroom size. All of the data that we receive from these sources allows us to give detailed feedback to staff, parents, and students, and helps us guide in the important decision-making around data. We want all of our students to have the opportunity to challenge themselves. Therefore, we provide every student in the 9th grade the opportunity to take the pre-ACT, and 10th and 11th graders the opportunity to take the PSATs, regardless of whether they have the means to do so or not. This budget also provides research support for our accomplished science research program. Much of what we do for data and evaluation are services that we contract through our local BOCES. We do this not only to receive discounts on the mandatory services due to the bulk purchasing from 35 districts in the cohort, but also to qualify for New York State aid on all expenses. Scoring our tests and assessments was traditionally done in-house to make sure we're meeting all New York State reporting requirements. For the past few years, we have outsourced our scoring to BOCES and the RIC. This decision maximizes teacher time in the classroom while minimizing the cost of hiring substitutes. This budget line also supports our summer scoring and proctors for the August Regents, as well as costs related to all of our state reporting, data warehousing, parents report, as well as our long-range planning demographer who helps out, again, with the data for future needs. This year, we worked with the Lyric to improve the professional development and support for the applications we purchased through them. In the past, we found their delivery model did not work well with our teachers and buildings. So we worked together to create a pricing structure that was more cost-effective for the district while continuing to provide the support that the teachers needed. We anticipate a large reduction in costs while providing better and more frequent on-demand support and in-house training. Data plays a vital and important role in our district, and we continue to provide an appropriate level of data support personnel who work diligently to meet the district's data needs. We build in staff development opportunities to keep all of us up to speed on data reporting changes that occur. We participate in a number of local conferences and user groups that allow us a chance to collaborate with our other districts in the area. This year, we are adding additional funds for conference and workshops to provide the support and training for transitional administrators and office support staff. This next portion represents the effort to support the integration of technology into the curriculum that's following along with the district's long-term technology plan. We want to support our staff in order to enhance their instruction using technology while increasing the motivation and engagement of our students in the learning process. More importantly, we want to give the students the ability to learn and to express what they have learned through the use of technology. We want them to become 21st century learners and global citizens while teaching them to be digitally safe. Our STREAM program has expanded rapidly. We have districts that come from all over the county to look at our program, and a lot of the new STEM programs that you see in other districts are actually modeled after some of the things that we put into place starting about 3 years ago. So we're very proud about that. I have increased the supply budget minimally to cover expendables and new equipment, but since this program is a mix of both high-tech and low-tech projects, this increase does not affect the overall budget. We continue to support our ongoing Chromebook initiative by providing all students access to Chromebooks in almost every classroom in the district. We will continue to supplement programs with new devices where needed and have a replacement cycle in place to spread the cost of device upgrades over an extended period of time. This year, we saw an unexpected increase in the cost of our Lyric technical and network support. Although it was a 1% increase over last year, this cost was offset by other reductions that I was able to make through the Lyric expenditures. All of our instructional and administrative devices are purchased through an IPA, which is an installment purchase agreement through the Lyric. This agreement is a lease that is amortized over 4 years, which allows us to maintain our equipment replacement cycles without putting all the money up at once. This is a process that we've been using for many years and allows us to receive state aid on almost all of our device purchases. Professional development is key into the success of technology integration into the curriculum. We frequently survey staff to build sessions that tailor to the variety of needs throughout the district. Our infrastructure. Over the past few years, I have committed to modernizing our internal network, our email systems, and our infrastructure. Through this process, we have built a secure, stable, and modern learning environment. Most of the equipment for infrastructure updates is purchased through a federal E-rate program. This greatly decreases the cost to the district. We receive 80% back from the federal government for any infrastructure projects, and then the state actually covers up to 61% of the amount that is left. So, for instance, if we were to roll out a $300,000 update to some of our switches or our servers, we would end up receiving $276,000 back. So you can see that it really behooves us to do as much of our infrastructure support and work through this program. It takes a lot more time. It takes a lot more paperwork because it is a federal program. But again, it definitely makes a huge difference in the cost to the district and to the taxpayers. Software as well. Much of the software that we use in the district is dollar for dollar state aidable. So although that there's been a shift in the way that our software is delivered, we no longer buy discs. Everything is online these days. Most of our online software that we use on all of our devices is also state aidable. So our staffing, we continue to support the instructional technology needs of the district through our staffing with myself and our amazing technology staff. The budget also covers the necessary supplies to keep our program running effectively. This includes, but is not limited to, printers, our ink and toner, computer peripherals, our LCD bulbs for our projectors, workstation laptops, our wireless access points, and other equipment. So what you'll see if you look at the budget is that you'll see an increase in our equipment budget line. But there's also an identical reduction in the materials budget line. This change was due to the higher costs of some tech equipment purchases for our instructional programs. The materials budget line has a $500 limitation. So a lot of the equipment that we are purchasing unfortunately goes over that $500 limit. And in order for us to be able to do this, I'm shifting some of our material costs into this equipment category. Our library automation and phone maintenance contracts remain static, but with the introduction of the Ossining TV YouTube channel, which we're actually streaming on right now, we were able to remove our old closed captioning service. YouTube's built-in closed caption system is now ADA compliant, which was the reason that we actually went and made sure that we had the closed caption in the first place. And this actually ended up being over a $10,000 savings per year. Central data processing covers the systematic costs that we use to cover all of our administrative programs and basically every single system that we run throughout the district. I don't think with the growth of technology, I don't think there's a single program that we don't use some sort of technology for in the district. And you'll see through our programs, we have My Learning Plan, which is what we use for our observations and for our professional development for teachers, ASOP, which is our substitute, WinCap, which is our business software, NutriKids, which is our food service, ConnectEd, which is our messaging software, IEP Direct, which is used for our special ed students, Naviance, which is our high school college advisory program, School Dude, which is our buildings and grounds and facilities program. And our new one is TransFinder, which is our transportation software. So all of those pieces we end up supporting all of that within our technology budget. This year we are adding 2 new services through our local BOCES. Both purchases are necessary to comply with new mandates from the State Education Department. The first one is Forecast 5. Forecast 5 is a service that is purchased for our business office. It provides organization and support for the new New York State transparency reports. This service may not be a continual purchase once we have a better understanding of what may be required for the report to be accurately submitted. This was the first year that we're going to be going into the transparency reports, and we are going to be using the service to really be able to make sure that we're doing it accurately. And then again, once we know and we can accurately reflect, next year we may not need this service at all. The Data Privacy and Security Service is designed to provide data security and privacy tools and resources alongside expertise to support our district to remain vigilant on data privacy and security. The Data Privacy and Security Service supports our compliance with the New York State's Common Core Reform Act, Ed Law 2D, which actually was just passed, I believe, in January. And there are a few pieces that need to be applied by July 1st. But this is going to be a continual effort that many districts are dealing with right now. So many districts have actually gone and joined with BOCES to build a cohort to be able to support each other, because it is a drastic difference, important difference. We want to make sure that we're keeping all of our student and teacher data private. So this is definitely something that is going to be important going down the road. Also included is our student information system in campus, as well as the public and portal systems, the public portals to the system. An inclusion that came in with last year was Tableau, which is a data visualization tool that we continue to work to implement effectively. All of these systems are kept online and updated via our network specialists. They work with the staff and throughout the district, but as well as our business office, to provide day-to-day support while working within all of these systems. Some more BOCES services. Every year since I became the technology director here in Ossining, the district auditors have made the recommendation that we create a system of redundancy within our network. With all of the district systems that I just talked about, we rely on 100% uptime for these systems. One failure in our district's fiber, and that would bring everything down to a crawl. And we'd be worried about student safety. Our transportation now goes through there, so it would make everything a lot more difficult. Until now, this has been completely cost prohibitive. So through BOCES, we've been able to renegotiate our fiber contract with BestWeb, and we've created a double looping system that will provide the redundancy necessary, as well as increase the bandwidth between buildings. And this is also going to go and support our security software, because the bandwidth necessary to be able to do a centralized security software, which I'm sure Jared will talk about soon, this is going to be able to support that throughout the district. So although this has increased the cost of our fiber connection by $6,000, this cost is federally E-rate and state aidable. So therefore, the cost will effectively be $878 after we receive the aid. BOCES continues to provide us with LAN support to help maintain our networks and all of our network filtering and security. Along with the tremendous growth of technology in our schools, we have seen an increase in the amount of data that we are backing up on a daily basis. We are working with staff and students to self-regulate the amount of files that are backed up, and we are working with teachers to help clean up things that they no longer need. We are hoping that as we go through this process, that we will begin to see a decrease in the costs over the next few years. This year, we also saw an uptick in the non-warranted hardware repairs. The budget was increased to make sure we can cover the cost of any further repairs, but this amount is entirely flexible. We never know what may or may not break during the year, but we want to make sure that we have it covered, so we may not end up spending that entire amount. Our help desk system helps us to maintain data in all of the areas, so that we can find out where the help is most needed and where we might need to be able to put in money to be able to support new equipment if necessary. AudioEye is our website tool that allows us to have our district be completely ADA compliant. It also supports our maintenance for WinCap, which is our business software, and our Avaya phone system, which is all of our phones throughout the district. We have continued to keep our phone systems on a lifeline. We have a very mixed bag, and I think I've said this for the last 2 years. Some of our phone systems go back to the 50s, and we've cobbled together things. So far, we've done a really good job being able to keep it up through Avaya and through some of the maintenance programs, but at some point, we are going to have to talk about looking into updating our phone systems throughout the district. A lot of that will be E-ratable, but the cabling that will help provide in that piece is aidable, but the phone system itself is not aidable through E-rate. So we will have to talk about that. But again, I think we'll be able to do another couple of years that in the future. We build in opportunities to support staff development for all of our systems. Every update to a system brings changes, and we need for our people to understand how to bring these changes into their workflow. This year, we will be providing increased support in Infinite Campus, in WinCap, and in our data warehousing. You will also see in this budget line that there's a similar increase to the equipment budget. It's for the exact same purpose as before, to be able to purchase equipment that is above $500 for our programs. But you'll see this time around, there's a reduction in the material budget line. We've been working over the past few years to decrease the printer, toner, and ink we use. We have seen more staff use digital materials and resources, which have contributed to the savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question, comment?
I have a question. I'm just on the Ossining live capture, trying to see if I can see us on video now. And then in trying to get on there, I saw the schedule or the board meetings from in the past aren't up to date. So
Are or aren't?
are not up
Okay.
to date. And I'm wondering, does the Ossining live capture convert easily in a manner that could be saved onto the website quickly?
It does. So when we started, and we've only been doing the Ossining Live, the Ossining YouTube channel for I think the past 3 or 4 board meetings. And that automatically archives and is available online the next day. And that includes, it takes a day for the closed captioning to also appear within that. We have been working I've been working with Martin McDonald to be able to get all of the older stuff that we've included on different applications, different systems, and trying to continue to upgrade so that we have a full list, an accurate list of all of the board meetings that are on there.
So for anybody who's watching in the audience or at home, if they wanted to go on YouTube, what would they just go to YouTube and type in a search, or what would they do?
Yep, so we bought the URL, OssiningTV.com.
Okay.
It's also a link off of our website. And some people will say, well, it's not there. And until Martin says go live, then the actual thing will pop up. The view will pop up. And then when we stop streaming, that view will go away. So sometimes people say, well, I didn't see it, and it was because we weren't streaming yet.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions? Any clarifying questions? Greg?
Just clerical one, and this may be you want to lead it, but I think on 24 and 61, the listed staff as different from your chart and what's in the budget book, just in titles. I don't know if it just, I'm assuming the salaries are right, but just,
The microcomputer repair technician, is
Yeah, I
that
think-
on 24?
right. But I think your slide said 2 network specialists and a
That's-
support staff.
It is
just-
network specialists. So it used to be called the microcomputer repair technician, so I will have to.
Okay.
to
I
change
just want to
that.
make sure it's the
Same thing. Mhm. Yeah, there was no increase in any personnel in the technology department.
Right. Look at, yeah, when you take a look at 61 as well, just to compare your slide, there was like, yeah. Your slide had 5 technology TAs.
Yep,
So,
that's the teaching assistants.
oh, that's the teacher assistant.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
And the only
other-
difference that you'll hear that we don't have it at the moment right now is the AMD technology coach.
Okay,
I actually stole her, and she is the technology coordinator
got it.
last year.
So we don't have that spot in the budget,
Correct.
or we have it, we just don't fill it,
Correct.
which is correct. We don't,
It's
have-
still, I believe it's
still in the
still in the
budget.
budget, but we have not yet filled it.
okay,
Because it was a .6 position,
yep,
and
understood.
we just didn't have the people at the time to be able to
Yep.
do that.
Okay. Any more questions?
Okay,
Okay. Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. lot goes into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So at this point, I'm going to invite our Director for Pupil Personnel, Ms. Maureen Buzang-Hale, to review our special education budget.
Oh, man, I think it's time for a bathroom break. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening. I could see this better when it was earlier and brighter. As you know, over the past several years, we as a district have been viewing our work with children through the lens of equity. And over the past few years, as part of our equity work, we have been examining our practices around the education of students with disabilities, and in particular, the degree to which we include students within the fabric of our schools. We've rightly been proud of the degree to which students with disabilities have been included in unified classes and Gimme the Mic at the high school. They've been included in theatrical performances and on the sports field. However, we recognize that our academic classes are not as inclusive as they might be. And research is strong in suggesting that the best predictor of academic and social success in school is participation in general education. A few years ago, we enlisted the support of an outside consultant to assist with the review of our special education programs. And as a district, we have committed to address her recommendations as a matter of equity. These recommendations include articulating our vision for the education of students with disabilities and restructuring district-wide, ensuring that all educators are well prepared for instructional shifts and that they have time to co-plan, and providing students with disabilities with instruction that allows them to access the general education curriculum in the least restrictive environment appropriate for them. The proposed budget supports the ongoing work and our vision for ensuring that we educate all members of our community through inclusive practices with responsive educators designing and delivering rigorous and relevant content to a community of learners who work together in authentic partnerships. Most importantly, we want to do this in a more genuine way where every student prospers. As you know, as a community of educators this year, we've continued our learning with administrators and coaches learning side by side with teachers, through systematic professional development, and with teachers receiving embedded coaching and feedback as they partner to identify barriers and to identify opportunities for access for more and more students with disabilities. But the goal is not solely inclusive education, although that is one goal. It is equity in education and opportunities. As such, a district-wide committee of diverse practitioners has worked this year to develop indicators of success. How will we know if our inclusive efforts are yielding the gains we would like? Our goal is not to modify the high-quality education taking place in general education classrooms. It is to allow for more students to access it for improved outcomes for students with disabilities and for all students. Successful inclusive practices will result in increased achievement on benchmark and high-stakes assessments in ELA and in math, and parents will report to us that they feel that their students are more successful, are better included and educated in a better way. SEPTO and the district will be co-hosting a community meeting in the spring to update the community around our endeavors in this regard and to continue our partnership with our parents. Finally, by using existing staff differently over time, students with disabilities will be present in general education in numbers that are more in natural proportions than has been the case in the past. Over the course of our work this year, we've already begun to see shifts. Practitioners have expanded their repertoire of planning and instructional strategies. They've improved their pedagogical practices. They've expanded their collaborations that have brought more students with disabilities into general education settings for greater parts of the day. And they've encouraged embedding related service goals into classroom curricula. The proposed budget, along with monies from federal IDEA grants, will allow us to continue and to expand this work and to continue to address the needs of all students with disabilities. Now, as I move into the budget pages, the majority of the budget pages I'll be presenting are relative to our initiatives around special education, although the Office of Student Services serves some other functions as well. So actually the first page, and as Mr. Hanna did, I'll have the budget page on the slide. The first page speaks to our function as records management. One of the functions of the Office of Student Services is to serve as the records retention function for the district, including both student and staff records. Centralizing this function allows for efficient archiving and retrieval of records and reduces duplication of effort. The second budget page also is not related to special education, but you can find it on page 42. When students are in other districts temporarily, whether in foster care situations or homeless situations, this page covers general education students whose districts of temporary residence bill back to Ossining for the student's tuition. Based on historical data and an analysis of enrollment patterns, a decrease is recommended on this page for next school year. The next page we'll look at is budget page 47, which begins the special education instructional pages. Success for our students, what did I do? Will it go away if I just leave it? This is why Mr. Hanna's office is next door to mine. Thank you. No, 47 the other way.
This one, 42?
I did that.
43?
Pay attention.
This way.
So success for students with disabilities may ultimately mean earning a Regents diploma or a local diploma and/or Certificate of Career Development and Occupational Studies, or a CDOS, or a Skills and Achievement Commencement credential. It may include transition to trade school, to a group home, to adult services, to a 2- or 4-year college, to the world of competitive employment, or to the armed forces. All possibilities are open to our students. Monies on this page reflect staffing and professional development to support our efforts to engage in increasingly inclusive practices district-wide, but at the same time, it supports an in-district continuum of services and supports, including special class settings and specialized 12-month programs for our students, with the goal of maximizing their development and the independence of individual students. In our elementary schools and at our middle school, some teachers included on this budget page provide intensive and evidence-based reading support to general education students as part of our work to improve overall student achievement and to avoid unnecessary referrals to special education. The anticipated over-expenditure on this page for one-to-one teaching assistants and the increase in budget to budget in this code reflects the needs of some students who moved into the district after the 1920 budget was finalized last year, as well as the needs of some students who we thought would need to be educated at home using consultants, but who with a lot of creative programming we've been able to bring into the district, but with one-to-one support. And you'll see when we look at the consultants page that there is a significant decrease, not only in this year's expenditures, but in next year's projections, because we were able to bring those students in. The increase in software below the line represents the renewal of a 3-year contract. So every 3 years we incur this expense. While you will notice on this page and on others, as we go through the budget, there are professional development monies. The bulk of our work around inclusive practices will be funded with federal money designated for the education of students with disabilities. The proposed budget supports the Committee on Special Education process at the non-public school located within the district, including instruction of students with disabilities there. It continues to support our schools with needed textbook and supplies through a per-pupil allocation. I've been practicing per pupil, I got through it that time. And adaptive equipment and assistive technology as mandated by individual students' education plans. This page reflects an increase of 1 special education teacher at the high school to allow for scheduling that won't restrict students' ability to attend the tech program of their choice or to participate in preferred electives. Move on to the next page, which is 48. The Office of Pupil Personnel Services centralizes the district's special education functions and enjoys a perspective on an individual student, a building level, and a district-wide level. Guidance counselors' contributions to post-secondary planning, including interest inventories, transcript reviews, course selections, college applications, and other work towards preparing students with disabilities for life after high school, is reflected on this page. The increase that you see on the salary line is in part a recommended increase in guidance staff at the high school, and that will be discussed more fully on Saturday. The role of school psychologists as it relates to their work with the CSA process is reflected on this page as well, as is clerical support to the Department of Student Services. Services purchased from BOCES, such as psychiatric evaluations and residency investigations, are reflected here, together with money for service contracts for assistive technology that we bought that we want to be sure we keep in good shape. So we send them out to be repaired and refurbished over the summer. On page 49, we look at tuition and related services. Across our 6 school buildings, psychologists and social workers support the social emotional needs of all of our students, providing interventions and supports that prevent unnecessary referrals to special education. Our occupational therapists incidentally support the needs of some of our non-classified students in the early elementary grades, meaning students who have needs that don't rise to a level of disability may be included in groups of students with disabilities. And they work through consultation and short-term direct service. Along the mandated continuum services are state-approved private day and residential schools, and these can be 10 or 12-month programs. We anticipate expending about the same on aggregate out-of-district placements next school year as this school year, meaning placements reflected on this page 49, as well as placements reflected on page 51, and the projected increase in private schools is offset by a projected decrease on the BOCES page. So if we want to skip over to the BOCES page for a minute, which is page 51, and then we can do a side-by-side comparison of the private schools and the BOCES tuitions. BOCES placements are considered to be less restricted than the private day and residential placements in that BOCES is considered still a public school placement. It offers a level of support that accommodates students with needs too intensive to be addressed within the school district, or needs that are so unique that it would be cost prohibitive for a school district to address them. This page also includes tuition for students attending BOCES who are eligible for extended school year or 12-month programming. So if we look at page 49 and 51 side by side, just looking at tuitions, you can see that it's very difficult, particularly this time of year, to project what students' needs will be by September, which would dictate what school or what program they're in. So we do our best to project that at this time of year, but you can see that some of the students that we projected to be in state-approved, in BOCES placements this year are actually in state-approved placements this year, but when we look at aggregate need for next year, we anticipate we'll be expending approximately the same amount of money on out-of-district tuitions. If we go back to page 49 for a minute, because there are some other items on that page. There's a line for public school placements on that page, and while some of those placements are made through the Committee on Special Education, just as we talked about tuition for general ed students who may be in foster or homeless situations in other districts, some tuitions on this page reflect students with disabilities who may be in foster or homeless situations in other districts, and those districts bill us back for tuition. This page also includes tutoring for students with disabilities who are hospitalized. It includes education of incarcerated youth and also payment to New York State Dormitory Authority. If we have a student attending a non-public school, a state-approved private school, where they've been approved to allow to do some building on their campus, that building is, the building cost is billed back to districts who have kids attending school there. The decrease in the consulting code here is what I was referring to earlier, as far as the students we were able to bring into our programs with the support of one-to-one teaching assistants. And we anticipate them staying with us next year. Based on current and projected need, the proposed budget does include a recommendation of a slight increase in occupational therapy for next year and a 0.4 increase of physical therapy. What that translates to is 1 additional day of an occupational therapist and 2 additional days of a physical therapist. If you move to budget page 50, looking at speech and language and services for students with hearing impairments, the proposed budget includes funding for speech therapists to evaluate students at the request of the Committee on Special Education, to participate in mandated child find screenings, both at our own schools and at the non-public school located in the school district, to provide mandated therapy with students with disabilities, and speech therapists in the early elementary grades, as the OT does, can support some declassified students as they age out of preschool special education, as well as some non-classified students in efforts to avoid unnecessary referrals to special education. The part-time teacher of the hearing impaired supports students through both a consultative and a direct service. Current and projected mandates suggest the need for additional speech time next school year, which is reflected on this budget page as well. As we move to page 52, we're looking at resource room and consultant teacher services. These teachers support students to allow for successful placement in general education settings, and also to support the teachers in accommodating students' needs in those settings. We can skip up to budget page 62, which is attendance. That's another function of the Office of Student Services. The proposed budget continues to provide us with efficiencies and convenience in offering families a central registration site. All families, regardless of what school their children will be attending, come up to 400 to register. This page also allows for records transfers to happen in a coordinated and expedited manner. The registrar ensures that residency changes within the district are documented and communicated to each of our school buildings, and facilitates the investigation of residency issues as appropriate. She also coordinates with county agencies to ensure timely registration of students in foster care and supports compliance with McKinney-Vento, which is the federal act regarding the education of students who are homeless. Our secondary attendance officers and deans of students assist in monitoring attendance in class and attendance to school, and to work with students and families as appropriate to put together supportive plans to improve patterns of attendance. Psychological services is on budget page 65. And this reflects, while the psychologists are reflected on a few other budget pages, the largest percentage of the psychologist salaries is reflected on this page. They conduct psychoeducational assessments to assist in educational planning, provide mandated counseling to individual students and to groups of students. They collaborate with building-based intervention teams to support students with academic and behavioral intervention plans. And that's for both students with disabilities and general education students. And they act as part of the response to intervention process. The increase in the line for professional development on this page speaks to the need of our therapeutic crisis intervention trainer to be recertified. She needs to be recertified every 3 years. As the mental health needs of our general education students and our students with disabilities continue to increase, reflecting national trends, the proposed budget includes an additional school psychologist to be housed at AMD and to support district-wide needs as well. Just to summarize the proposed student services budget, we're looking to increase special education teacher line by 1 teacher at the high school, speech language therapist by 1 day of an occupational therapist, 2 days of a physical therapist, and 1 full-time bilingual school psychologist. This budget supports our practice of intervening early through building-based supports to our youngest learners as they enter kindergarten, and also supports our RTI processes across the district. It supports our continued efforts to provide equitable and increasingly inclusive opportunities, as well as maintaining a continuum of services to support student success now and in their future. And finally, just to remind you that supplemented by federal IDEA monies, it supports continuous improvement by building educator capacity through professional development. And I thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody have any clarifying questions?
On page 62, when you said they monitor legal responsibilities such as residency of newly enrolled students,
Yes.
is that just for newly enrolled students, or?
It's not. There are several times throughout the year that we may have suspicion that a family's not living in the district. The process is the family is sent a first letter asking them to demonstrate that they continue to live in the district by providing us with 4 proofs of residence. Sometimes families do that and we continue to suspect they don't live here, and then we can employ other assistance through BOCES to confirm or refute the fact that the families live here. Many times the families don't come in with the proof of residence, at which point a second letter goes, letting them know because we don't have any evidence that they're living in the district, giving them an end date for their students and offering to help them enroll in the district that they are living in.
Are there cases where that have happened where addresses have been used that don't actually exist within the district, and what would be the protocol then?
We're pretty careful with that, and with the cooperation of the Transportation Department, because they have a very good record of legitimate addresses in the district. We also have had, not any time recently, I can recall in years past, people using like the postal address because it's a real address and you don't have to put a P.O. box. That hasn't happened in a very long time, but we're aware of addresses like the postal place.
So any claims of illegitimate addresses would then be sent to this office?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, all the buildings do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Greg?
More of an observation, and this is back of the envelope math, but on your, and I'm not going to ask you to confirm this, because it's truly back of the
What
envelope.
page are you looking at?
Well, I summed up, it's just an observation, on pages 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, there's like 15 million of total costs, and I think the increase nets to about 200,000. So, to the point, I know you have plus, increase
Yes.
on one page and
Yep.
offsets on other pages. So, from a budget, purely budget perspective, that's a fairly friendly increase on a big number, which I know in special ed, year to year, it's student specific, so it's hard to project. But
It is, and I can give you, for instance, on the private school page, between the time the budget was ratified in May and September, we had 3 students move in who were already placed very appropriately at CPW, which is the UCP facility in, seems like it's Connecticut, but it's not, Rye Brook. And one of those students had a 1-to-1 aide. So that was 3 tuitions and a 1-to-1 teaching assistant that we didn't anticipate. At the same time, Then we have a student who's at BOCES who's very costly, who moves out of the district, and we didn't anticipate that either. So it really is a constant balancing, and that's why I did frame it with it's very hard to predict this time of year where we're going to end up in September.
And just to make a distinction between the BOCES, the students with special education needs that are serviced by BOCES, and then the vocational students, that's a separate.
It's a separate page that'll be discussed on Saturday.
Okay.
We do have students who are in both programs, but their tuition factoring at the tech program is the same way as a student who's going from the high school.
Okay, and that'll be covered on Saturday. On Saturday. Okay, great. All right, does anybody have any more questions? Thank you very much,
Thank
Maureen,
you.
for this
You're
very
welcome.
comprehensive presentation. Thank you. Okay.
So I want to thank Maureen Buzang-Hill for this presentation and also the effort to coordinate and prepare the budget. So we should have done it with Mike too, and I apologize. Hopefully Mike is hearing us, but please join me in thanking Maureen for her efforts. So join me in giving her a round.
You can clap for budget items.
Okay, so we're moving along. We're going to move into our transportation budget, and I'm going to ask our Director of Transportation, Mr. Jim Minahan, to come up and walk us through his budget.
Good one. Walk
Guide
us
us
through.
through.
Blue.
Trump, run through, whichever.
Now the exciting world of transportation. Okay, so I'd just like to start off, commenting. Alita made a statement early in the budget presentation about how we've been able to drive down the transportation costs. So just, quick history lesson. In 2012, the district went out, conducted an RFP, has a new contractor, got a new contractor in 2012. It's still the same contractor that we're using now. When that transition happened, we were able to restructure a lot of the routes that were being done at that time, and we were able to realize more efficiencies with transportation. I think we were able to cut out 10 routes at that time. So we've stuck with this vendor. We've extended our contract with them several times, and one of the benefits of that is, and I'll speak to that in budget, is contract increases are capped by CPI. That's good for the district because the highest the transportation the budget can go at that point is 3%. It hasn't been 3% for as long as I've been doing transportation. So last year it was 2.2%. This year it was 1.5%. So you can see how we're able to kind of keep our transportation costs in check by doing that, by staying with the current contractor and just extending our contracts out. So I think this budget reflects the continuance of trying to keep our transportation costs in check. And what I'll do is I'll walk you through the budget pages. I believe in your books it starts on page 69. And we're going to start on page 70 where the budget line items are. And speaking to staff salaries. So staff salaries covers the transportation supervisor, 2 office staff members, and 2 driver groundsmen. So to give you just a perspective of how that works, in the transportation office, no, I don't have a, in the transportation office, there's myself and 2 office assistants, and annually we handle all of the transportation kind of soup to nuts. So we do all the routing, we handle parents' questions and concerns, and the office staff handles, believe it or not, over 500 requests for bus changes annually. So those changes are everything from daycare requests to change of addresses to requests to go to private or parochial schools. So annually, there's 3 of us in the office handling all of that. The 2 driver groundsmen, we have 2 people who are dedicated to transportation. As you may know, we own 4 of our own vans. So those vans are assigned morning and afternoon routes, home to school routes. And in the middle part of the day, they provide field trips to the schools. And those trips, the schools take advantage, and that would be Eagle Watch, and that would be apple picking and T-Town and stuff like that. And we're able to provide those in the middle part of the day at no cost to the school. So that's one of the benefits of having some of our own vehicles. Overtime is for those staff members, whether it be the drivers or the office staff members. The line for bus monitors. So the increase for this year is because we needed to increase our bus monitor staff from 27 to 31. We needed to add 4 additional monitors. Those additional monitors, well, the bulk of our monitors are special ed related. So they're required by the IEPs, and we provide that. We've had to add 2 for special ed reasons, and we have 2 floating for student management reasons. That was a topic that we discussed at last year's budget about having monitors assist the drivers for student management issues. Going down to the other than personnel services. So in the equipment this year, you see a request for, I don't know how it's written in your budget, but for a safety and educational tool, which is called Buster the Bus. It's a program I'd like to bring to Ossining and Institute for school bus safety. And basically, it is a remote control robotic bus that's about the size of that desk, maybe a little smaller. And other districts use it. It's great for kids for their buy-in of school bus safety. It's kind of a public relations tool. You know, the kids get used to seeing it at events, and it's a pretty good way to teach school bus safety. That's a new request for this year. Staff development is pretty much the same as every year. Those are the state and national conferences. Those are conferences for the routing program to send staff to update on the routing programs. The next line is for other expenses. So in that line for other expenses are our required driver physicals, drug testing, weather services. The next line for equipment repairs, that's for our maintenance, our annual maintenance of our own buses. And we contract that service with our current bus contractor. So they provide us maintenance services and DOT inspection services. Our insurance is for the school buses, the 4 buses that we own. The consultant, so this year you see money allocated for consultant. So last year what we did was we switched our routing program. We went from Versatrans, which we've had for many, many years, and we're having difficulties with that. And we switched to a new software company called TransFinder. So if you remember, we started this year out a little behind because we were having some data integration issues between our current district software with Infinite Campus and the routing software. So letters went out later than we expected, and getting all of that working. We got it working, and it was not as bumpy as I thought it was going to be. But one of the things that we've realized as parents, parents would call us with their concerns, and what the new software was doing was it was splitting up family bus stops. So we would have a bus stop, say, at the corner of, say, Spring and Main for the Brookside student, and then the Claremont student would be at Spring and Waller. So parents were concerned, how do I get between 2 bus stops? So one of the things the consultant is doing is we're creating standardized bus stops district-wide. So these stops will always be in place, so when anybody either moves into the district or when we do our annual routing, all the stops will be at these specific bus stops. So it won't pick based on age or however it was doing it before. they will all be standardized. One of the things that we're going to be able to realize by doing that is once we standardize the bus stops, the routing software has a feature called route optimization. So what we do now is we manually plot out all the routes, and one of the things this will now do is the computer will actually generate the routes, and we can either accept it or not accept it. If we think it makes sense and look at it, we have the possibility of actually starting to eliminate at least one more additional route for next year. So that's the benefit of having the consultant work with us. The supply codes, that's our district mailing, our Easy Pass account, legal notices that we send out. The safety supplies and materials are just standard office materials. Gasoline is for our vehicles only. We don't use tire and chains anymore. On the next page, and this is where the bulk of the budget is, and this is for our contract transportation. So last year we budgeted for 82 routes. This year I'm budgeting for the same. I am expecting to, once the consultant gives us all his work, I am expecting that to be 81 routes. The reason we don't budget for 81 routes is because we never know what comes up during the year. We could get a special ed placement. We may need to add a bus because of crowding or what have you. So we always like to keep one bus as a just in case for budget purposes. So you'll see the reduction in that line. So that's a result of two things. One is this year I've anticipated the CPI increase to be about 2%. So that's one thing. And the other thing is we've restructured how the way we contract buses is per hour. So they're in categories. We have 2 to 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours. And what we've realized is we are able to keep more of the buses in the 2 to 4 hour categories and not need to expand out to the 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 hours. So we've been able to reduce costs that way. The computerized routing system, so last year we purchased the routing system, and you'll see that there is no more additional cost as far as the routing system goes. And that's why there's no change in that budget for this year. And on the last page of transportation, those are all the academic field trips, athletic transportation, and music and art transportation. So that's on the last page for that. So that's pretty much the transportation budget.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Getting late.
Anybody have any questions for Jim?
So you said we own 4 buses?
Yes, 4 vans.
4 vans?
4
okay.
vans. So we have 2 20 passengers and 2 28 passengers.
Have we ever looked into buying our own buses as opposed to going contractual?
That's a topic that comes up every once in a while. So there's a couple things that go into that, right? So it's a huge capital expense to purchase, because right now we contract out 82 and we operate 2 of our own. So there's 84 routes. So to buy 84 buses is a huge capital expense. The other part to it is we would need a facility to house and operate those vehicles, and we don't have that yet.
Fair enough. Thank you.
No problem.
Just for background, we had that conversation, I don't know how many years ago, but if we could find a large plot of land, even if we outsourced, but we could provide a huge piece of land to house those buses, we could save some money. And we scoured the map of Ossining and just couldn't find a big open plot to do that. But it's always out there if we find the land.
I'm just thinking long-term, it would pay off over time, I'm sure, compared to contractual every year. But
It's still, right, it's finding the land, yeah.
of course.
I think, whatever, 30, 40 years ago, there was I think Ossining's buses were down on the waterfront in one of those spots.
That's right.
And then,
Now there's
Yeah.
a building there and
yeah,
parks.
when we did the RFP, I guess it was when we did the RFP to pick the bus, it became clear that if they, if we could provide the land to store the buses, they could still provide the drivers and the buses without the big capital project, but there just isn't, we didn't find the land.
Is the new routing software, has it helped to reduce the time that students will be on the bus? I know some of the routes have been, over the long period of time for children to, within the Ossining School District, area, to be on the buses for a long time because they were, I know we had.
No, the routes, the timing of the routes has stayed pretty much consistent.
So what's the longest amount of time that a student would have to stay on, from
In district?
in district, right?
In
Yep.
district, probably 45, 50 minutes is the longest.
Okay. And what, if you don't, what age group is it?
Well, I don't know that off the top of my head. So there's a couple things that go into actually building the routes. So capacity plays one part and distance plays the other part. The thing that really we need to tie it together to is what the bell time is. So based on the bell time, we basically go backwards, and for the out of district, well, I shouldn't say out of district, but for the routes that go the furthest in the district, to the Yorktown side of the district, those are not as heavily loaded. So we try to spread that out to shorten the route times. But even if you take your own car out there, that's probably from Park School to Shadeen is probably a 15-minute ride just on its own.
Catherine?
Yes, thank you. I know that we had briefly talked about this last budget season, but there is this legislation with the bus cameras and ticketing. Can you just tell us where that sort of stands?
Okay, so what you're talking about is recently, and I'm going to say within the last year, the legislature passed and the governor signed allowing there to be cameras on the side of the school buses that would catch motorists that pass a stop school bus, right? So there's a lot of pieces to that, and there are districts who jumped on that who are starting to have a little bit of a problem. And the problem is the vendor who provides that has challenged the way the state has administered that. So it's not as easy as we had liked. The way the program is supposed to work is the vendor is supposed to bear the cost of the cameras and installation, and then they would receive the portion of the fines generated for that to offset the cost of that. And then the balance of that cost goes to the municipality in which the event happened. And when I say the municipality, that's the town or the village. The school district sees none of that revenue,
Okay.
which I think is different than what was proposed. I think originally, the district was supposed to see a portion of that, but that did not become part of the legislation.
So in your opinion, would your recommendation be to wait until those kinks are worked out before exploring that again?
Absolutely. I think we need to see what happens with, because the person or the company that's challenging that is a vendor competitor to the current camera company. So they're saying that the legislation was written specifically for this one camera company, and they're challenging that so that other companies that provide the same benefit, how come they're not included in this? I think that needs to work itself out before we even go down that road.
Okay. I'm pleased to hear that there are additional bus monitors being budgeted for the buses. I think that's a huge concern of a lot of parents, especially with the length of the routes. So that's very exciting. I wanted to know if you could give us any kind of indication when there are incidents on the bus, how are those reported? Like, do you get, I don't know, weekly, monthly reports and check-ins from your drivers? How does that
No,
happen?
well, honestly, if there's an incident, we get it daily.
Okay.
Right, so nothing comes to us like on a monthly or weekly type report. So when there's an incident, depending on what the incident is, the driver will write up a conduct report, and that gets turned into the bus company, who then gives us a copy of it, and it gets turned into the school. Certain things don't rise to the level of a conduct report. They're more or less, maybe there was a verbal argument on the bus. That would be an incident report. That also, same process, gets copied, sent to us, goes into the school. And then the school administers what happens next. So they, upon receipt of whatever that report is, will follow up with the students involved, the other students who may have seen, and what have you. I did some checking and spoke to the schools, and actually formalized or formal reports are actually down this year. But that doesn't mean that other stuff isn't happening. It just means the actual reporting is down, right? But students will go into the school, which the driver may or may not be aware of an incident, and report incidents on the bus to the principal or assistant principal, and then they'll follow up with them. If the principal feels that there's a need, they generally call me or email me and say, hey, can we put a monitor on the bus? So we have 2 sub-monitors, which we use for absences, but in the event that we would need to put somebody on a bus as a request from the principal, we would just move that monitor to the bus for whatever the duration needed was. So the driver gets, some student management assistance if needed.
Okay. And then my last comment, which is, this is not a tonight answer at all, it's just sort of a thinking question, which is, in the event that during this budget process, there's some exploration of after-school programs at the elementary level, it'd be nice to have an understanding of what potential busing options might look like and run us from a cost perspective and a feasibility option. So
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay. So just to give you an idea, because we do some of that now, and this is one of the things that helps control our transportation costs. So, like I said, the way our contract's written, buses are basically in our categories, right? So whenever there's a request for additional program, what I try to do is I try to fit it in where there's a gap that we're already paying for. So on a 2 to 4 hour bus, and when I speak 2 to 4 hours, we contract for live hours. So live time, that's when the students are on the bus. So when there's a gap in there, that's where I try to fill in the additional programs, so we don't necessarily have to, bear the additional expense. When the request is outside of where I can plug in these open slots, then what we're doing is we're taking, say, that 2 to 4 hour bus and pushing it into the next category. So going into the next category, there is a cost with that. So that's what I would need to know, like, what time you're looking at, how many students we're looking
I'm
at.
sure there are dozens of variables. It's
Right.
just sort of food for thought
Yep.
at this point.
Yep.
Melissa?
You mentioned before that a lot of the routes are condensed into the 2 to 4 hour period. Does the result of that, does that increase the amount of students that are on the bus? Is it like to capacity on?
No, some of the buses are at capacity. We do try to maximize the use of the bus before we have to go to a second or an additional bus. But no, not every bus is at capacity. And by keeping them in the hours is really not indicative of actual loading. Like I said, when we develop the routes, it depends on how far that bus goes out. So we may have one bus that goes to one part of the district that picks up in 3 or 4 stops, and that bus is loaded. And then we have a bus that goes out to the Yorktown side of our district and picks up maybe half a bus load on its way back in, right? Both of those are 2 to 4 hour buses.
Okay, just one more question. The transponder software, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, at the budget workshop, you had mentioned the potential that software has outside of kind of scheduling the routes. There's actually like a real-time kind of tracking system or alert system if buses are running late, or?
Right, so that's the connection to Connect Ed.
Okay.
Right? That's one of the things the consultant is working on, because, and Mike talked about it in his presentation, you have two different databases, so Infinite Campus has to talk to TransFinder, right? And all that information has to make sense going both ways. And that's one of the things the consultant's working at. Because every time we take the download from Infinite Campus, it changes stuff in our system. So that has to stop happening before we can then go to Connect Ed. Because that was the other piece of TransFinder that really made it appealing to us. Once that happens and everything flows correctly, we would be able to, with one call, just like a Connect Ed and we do a snow day, we would be able to call and Connect Ed for a bus and say one bus is broken down or one bus is running 20 minutes late. And we're not there yet. We're still working that transition out.
Okay.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you very much.
No problem, Lisa.
Thank you,
There's
Jim.
your Comprehensive.
Are we clapping now?
Yes,
Yeah.
Let's clap.
Yes, thank you.
we're a happy group.
Still be here next Saturday.
All right, so we're going to finalize the presentations with Jared Mance, who's our Director of Facilities. Just take the note, he's been here for a short period of time and already doing an outstanding job, so we just want to thank him for the efforts he's put forth already and for preparing our facilities budget.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think I'll open up talking a little bit about the meeting that Dr. Sanchez referred to earlier that I was able to attend. The New York Power Authority is putting together a program. At this point, they've run a pilot with the city of White Plains. The goal of the program is to aggregate together municipalities, and we're school district is a municipality in that regard. Pool all those resources together in the county of Westchester and go out for one RFP to solar developers to come back with proposals. The idea is that by pooling all of our resources together, we will be more attractive to solar developers, and so we'll be able to get more attractive terms. The other advantage that I could see in going this route is that the New York Power Authority has the expertise and the ability to do the RFP, prepare the RFP, evaluate the proposals, and help with technical assistance with to the school district or the different towns, villages, cities to help them implement the project. There's one little hiccup that I could see maybe in the way of doing this, and I think this can be overcome. But there's a question. The main focus of this program is to then put this out to make this a community solar program, so that people in the community, different organizations, different individuals in the community, can then purchase power that's generated by these solar installations. So the question comes is, will state ed approve a project where a school district does these types of solar installations? Because we have to go to the state ed department, they're the authority having jurisdiction for building permits in a school, in a public school setting. They would have to then approve us then essentially making that power available to people in the community. So that is one little hiccup that I actually was sitting in the room with a couple other fellow facilities directors in the county, and we were discussing that back and forth, and also after the meeting with one of the people from NYPA. So I think it has some real possibilities, and I think that with the governor's initiatives of really, making renewable energy a big part of the way we're producing power in this state in the future, that these are probably problems that can be, or little obstacles that can be overcome. So I talked to Dr. Sanchez about it earlier today on the phone, and I filled out the preliminary paperwork, which is a basic one-page form, and emailed that in this afternoon, to the New York Power Authority, so I'm sure I'll be hearing back from them. So it's a, we have zero solar on our buildings right now, and it may be a possibility of getting a solar project together that could make sense for the school district. We'll see, we'll look into it and we'll see. So that's a quick update on that informational meeting today. But there was a lot of people in the room. There's probably 150 people in the room from all over Westchester County hearing about the program this morning. So any questions about that before I get into the budget part? Okay.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jared, just, I don't know if this was shared, I know we had the conversation last meeting or two, and there was some community conversation on a similar topic. And just maybe a question, I know we talked about in the facilities, I think, like a Brookside school, if you put the canopies in the parking lot there, does that create a snow issue with kids who are young and it's coming off? But is the guy, I don't know that solar is necessarily is part of our budget cycle, but it's the kind of thing that would be interesting to explore as we have those conversations, is safety issues related to solar that, residential or...
That particular question came up in the meeting today, and my understanding from what I heard today is that there's technology out there. Some of it is actually proprietary that deals with that particular issue and shedding the snow off those parking shelters.
So it'd be like a pitch-specific company by company thing?
It was mentioned, it was explained in real general terms. That's basically was the gist of it I got out of it. But because they did mention it's proprietary, that there's a company out there that has a solution for that problem.
And just real quick, we're talking about installing on our buildings, not like buying into a farm somewhere else at a remote location?
Well, it could be that, but no,
Okay.
we're talking about installing solar on our buildings.
Okay.
And the town of Ossining was there, the village of Ossining was there. I touched base with them after the meeting as well. They're excited and they're looking into it as well. That doesn't mean that we necessarily have to partner up with the town and the village, right? But basically you're partnering up with everybody in the county that wants to participate.
Okay.
So,
I also sent the article that talked about like the guardrails that they put at the end of like slanted building, so it essentially breaks up the snow as it's falling off, and it mitigates any harm that would be caused. It's actually funny, I was taking the LSAT Saturday at William Patterson, and they had these canopies everywhere. And they said the entire campus is basically energy independent. So again, that would be my personal goal, was to have the canopies versus the roof, just in case we have to expand. But I'm looking forward to having that conversation as we continue to move forward with this.
Did they give an estimate of what the cost would be in the ballpark per district? Installing.
If this is done right, the cost would be zero. This could potentially be, if you had solar installed on your buildings, it
We
could
got
be a
that.
zero cost, and would actually give you the ability to buy power at a cheaper rate than you currently do. That's actually one of the hang-ups that they explained. We purchase our power from the New York Power Authority, and we get a very attractive rate from NYPA purchasing our electricity. So that actually winds up being a disincentive to doing a private solar system, because because we buy our power so inexpensively, you don't have the potential savings there that another customer that doesn't buy their power directly from NYPA. See, not only municipal customers can purchase power from NYPA directly. Private customers, private companies, and individuals cannot purchase power from NYPA directly. So.
Interesting.
So if it's okay, I was confident this was going to lead the conversation, but, we just wanted to give you a quick update. Certainly, we're cognizant of solar as a potential for us, so this is very preliminary, but really wanted to share with the board and the community. We've attended, we're listening, and there's clearly much more we got to figure out before we proceed, but and along the way, we'll continue to provide updates. Why don't we get into facilities?
All right, so getting into the facilities, I'm going to walk through similar to what Mr. Minahan did, starting on page 19, which is an appropriate place to start because it starts with personnel. And none of what we do in buildings and grounds could happen without the people that are involved. So Those budget lines that are on page 19 include the custodians, the maintenance mechanics, the groundskeepers that work in the district, and then supervisory personnel and clerical. I can't say enough. I'm here just a few months, about 6 or 7 months now. I can't say enough about the quality of the people that that we have on our staff here at Ossining. I've been extremely impressed by their abilities and their talents. They're extremely dedicated in what they do, and they really care about it. My focus, and I always talk to my staff about, is remembering that we're here to make sure the buildings are ready for students every morning. That's our function. And so when questions come up or problems come up, I always remind staff that that's why we're here. And I can tell you that that your staff is already in that mindset. I don't have to change the culture there on that at all. So it's been a pleasure getting to know them and working with them. So that's where the salaries are. Turning the page to page 20 is the equipment requests. And the equipment line requests that I put into the budget include a quantity of 4 of specialized floor machines. I use these with success in the district that I came from before I came to Ossining. These are machines that give us the ability to refinish floors without using floor stripper. Floor stripper is a chemical process that removes the wax from the tile floors, and it gets us back down to the base. But it's a caustic chemical. It's a chemical. It's also extremely slippery when you're working in that environment. It's like working on roller skates on ice. It really is that bad. And so what these floor machines are able to do is we use straight water, no chemical, to remove the floor wax, refinish, and then we can refinish the floors and put new layers of wax down. Where I worked previously, it kind of changed the way we approach summer because it enables us to get in and out of classrooms quicker and do a better job. That's not to say it totally eliminates chemical floor stripping. There are times when it's appropriate to still use chemical floor stripping, but it'll greatly reduce it. So it's a capital investment up front, but it's safer for our personnel that are doing the work, and it's also chemical free. I also included in that equipment request line improved snow removal equipment for sidewalks. We added a lot of sidewalks here at the high school with the capital project that we did last year, the park improvements. I never had the advantage. I never got to see the parking lot before the improvements. There's been some bumps in the road, but it's working out well. But we've added a lot of sidewalks, and I've gotten that feedback from the staff. This year, we've been very fortunate. We've had very little snow, but almost no snow. But that's not going to happen every winter. So that's the other component of that. The safety and security equipment relates to some of the improvements that need to be made in the badge reading and camera equipment. Moving to the next page, page 21, it basically talks about utilities and where we're spending our money purchasing mostly natural gas and electricity, and then the other utilities. There's a small budget line for fuel oil, which is to kind of maintain what we have in the tanks, because we do run the boilers on oil, very, very limited, just to make sure that they continue to operate, and if we never needed to switch to oil, that they would work. Turning to page 22, we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the budget. Staff development is just that, staff development of, getting people to trainings, which is an area that Dr. Sanchez has asked that we improve on and get people, staff members, trained in different areas. Also membership in some of the state organizations and national organizations that are appropriate for helping to manage facilities. The other expenses line is the EPC software. Back about 8 or 9 years ago, you did an energy performance contract, and we're required to maintain that. contractually. Insurance is just that. It's liability insurance and auto insurance on the trucks and vehicles, and the liability insurance associated with that. The rentals line includes a rental of equipment that we need from time to time. Sometimes it doesn't pay to purchase tools that we only use once or twice a year. And then the other thing that's in that rental line is the rental of the space at Pace University that you use for graduation. Architects' fees are just that, architects' fees. So it's fees paid to design professionals for the work that we're doing throughout the year. Fixed asset is basically software to keep track of fixed assets. And fixed plant expense is building repairs, things that are, that's a big line item, but it's all of the repairs that are going into the different fixed parts of the buildings. Service contracts is also a major line. Those are the things that are done by outside vendors that maybe we can't do in-house. So those are like fire alarm inspections, pest control, the BMS and control system, fire extinguishers, hood cleaning, and the list goes on and on. There's roof inspections, there's a lot of different things. Fire inspections falls out of that line. So those are all things that are done out of that line. Equipment repair is repair to district equipment, so whether it be equipment that the custodians are using or equipment that the maintenance staff is using, and things that we use every day that might need repairs. And building repairs are those items that need fixing throughout the year, whether it's replacing motors, replacing doors, could be any number of things that need to be fixed in the buildings over the course of the school year that either break or get worn out. Turning to page 23, office supplies is just that. It's supplies that are used in the office. Custodial supplies are all of the tools and equipment and consumables that the custodians are using on a day-to-day basis to do their jobs. So things like mops, brooms, and consumables like the paper goods, toilet paper, paper towels, soaps, those kinds of things. The program improvement line are those requests that were submitted by the building administrators and then vetted through the court process, which is the review process of the things that the building principals have requested to be done in their buildings to help facilitate the programs in their buildings. Gasoline is the gas in the vehicles, and repair of the vehicles is repairs that are done to the maintenance fleet that we have of the trucks and vans that are working throughout the district every day. And maintenance supplies are the little parts and pieces, the plumbing fittings, the flush valves, the electrical devices that we're buying all the time to maintain all the little things that happen in the district. That's about it in a summary. Are there any questions?
On the office supply item, the current expense is like almost 3.5 times the budgeted amount. Is that an outlier? Is that what happened in this last year? That's page 23. Was there like one big project or something that?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know the answer to that.
No problem. Thank you.
I can't think of anything offhand where that amount of money was spent, but I'll check on it.
Thank you.
We're talking about the current, we're just at
Yeah.
the current expense, we're not even through the year yet.
That's what I'm saying. It's already 3.5 times what we budgeted for.
Yep.
So we spent 24,000.
Office supplies.
Oh.
We allocated 6,900. It's almost 25,000.
Yeah. I'm not remembering anything in particular. We don't use that line very often. We'll check into it.
Thank you.
General question?
Sure.
Just for clarification, I wanted to see how, maybe I'm not seeing how it ties together. I know that Alita's presentation,
Sorry.
oh, sorry. Alita's presentation showed that the natural gas is our primary source of energy, and electricity and all those rates were kind of flat, but then there's a big increase on, is that a different expense associated with that?
So I'm going to take a closer look at that line. So that line might come down a little bit or significantly, because I think it is a little high. So I'm going to take a look at that line.
You're talking about that 114,000
Yeah.
electricity line? Okay.
Greg, do you have any questions?
Just an observation and a question. Just looking back, that PACE investment rental we make every year has been great. I think it's probably been 8+ years. We used to do it on our grass field out here, and I remember, I'm pretty sure it was 33,000 was the number. We went back and forth on, do we make the change or not? PACE has been a great partner. We now, I think 8-9 years later, paying 29,000, so the cost hasn't gone up, it's gone down a little bit, and I think we probably couldn't do it on grounds. That's the graduation cost. I think we couldn't do it here, and so that's been fantastic. It's worked out really well. And on hot days when it's
Yeah.
hot or raining, it's a lifesaver. I know last year we bought the card readers here. We got 4. You mentioned card readers. Are we happy with the 4 we have, or are we looking to get any more?
That's a different aspect. That's a different budget item.
Okay.
So I'm not familiar with that,
Okay.
what you're referring to. What you're referring to, I believe, is the student ID system?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to here is the card readers for access, door access through the outside doors to the buildings.
Okay.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
Your observation of the high school new driveway, which was new when it was our
Right.
first year, any thoughts or any shifts that we're going to need to make, or maybe Stephen Hancock will share that?
I've worked with Mr. Hancock on some tweaks that we've made, mostly with signage. Both Mr. Minahan and I have observed the traffic patterns, and we've troubleshooting. We've done some troubleshooting of some of the issues. One of the main issues, and there's really nothing that we've observed, and there's nothing that we can do in the school district to fix this, is the kind of the jam of traffic that happens on Elm Moulton, as people exit. The other thing is a behavior thing, and getting people to move up and getting parents to drop off in where we want them to drop them off, which is we added signage. They're nice and big, and they're very obvious, but still sometimes people,
Right, because they drop off at
Right
right
at the
by the
turn.
cross.
right on a crosswalk.
Crosswalk. Yeah. And then if they drop them off somewhere in between there, they have to either walk to one end, or the student would have to walk to one end, which is further from the main entrance. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just continue to observe it. I know some,
I'm told that it's a lot better than it was. And it's not a perfect system, but it does work pretty well. The one thing that it does is you're not unloading buses in the street, which I'm understanding that's what you used to do.
Yep.
And that's a huge, having that not happen anymore is a huge, improvement in safety.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
presentation.
Thank you.
First one, excellent.
Thanks, Jared.
We're going
Appreciate it.
to soon open it up
Sure. Yep.
to the public. For
Hey,
does anybody have any more questions right now before we open it up to the public for comments?
Yeah, I was just following up on the initial presentation.
That's right.
I think there's 2 things we need to do. One is where Aaron just went. I think we need to figure out as a board when we're going to spend like a good chunk of time talking about philosophically, reserves, tax cap, spending on non-recurring revenues that, every year we talk about, but we don't have a formal place to put it. We go through every expense line item, but we don't have a placeholder. I would suggest it should be that March 11th meeting. We can't, the problem with that conversation is you can't conclude it until you know what your state aid is, which is April 1st. But if you wait until April 1st to have the conversation, you don't have time to adjust and ask Alita for, what ifs and things like that. So I think we need to, I don't know what the time is, but I think, again, reading through the lines of Aaron, some of your questions and others' questions, I think we could sit here for an hour and should sit here for an hour talking about conceptually, what should we be doing, not doing. And I think we need to let the community know. I know we have placeholders for meetings, but we don't have, when those topics will come up. I know tonight's not the night, but, I'm happy to start the conversation soon.
Yeah, so if it's okay, I'll respond. I think March 11th was a date that we understand the need to have the conversation. The beginning of the year, the Board of Education discussed this as a matter of wanting just to have some more time. And so February 11th traditionally has been that time where we've gone through the whole budget. You give us areas that you want us to look at, and then we come back and kind of report and say, this is what we've done, this is what we haven't done. So it seems like February 11th would be a good
March
time.
11th.
Sorry, March. I guess I want to stop time. So March 11th would be appropriate. Alita and I did have conversations. I've had some preliminary conversations with Lisa Rudley about that as well, so that it can give us some time. What I probably should have said in the beginning, I want to really encourage us to go through this process, because immediately, as the nature, we went right to the numbers, and then what can we do around reserves and everything else. That deserves and merits time, but I think we need to understand the whole budget to understand and go through that, so that then in turn at the end we can say, because along the way you can be making recommendations, say we'd like you to look at this number and maybe we can reduce it, maybe we increase it. So the numbers that are in this preliminary set could edit based on the dialogue that we have both with the board and the community along the way. You may tell us to add a position. You may ask us to decrease a position. We may, energy costs came up. We may look back and there might be some changes. So while we're eager to get to that conversation, I'd really encourage us to give us the time to understand everything that's in the budget first before we get to the sort of that final stage and the fiscal component, which are really important. But so is what we're recommending in terms of the programs for our kids and our students. I.e., we've heard oftentimes, sometimes the conversation is, well, enrollment's steady. But you just heard in special education, we just added like at least 3 or 4 positions because of student needs. And does it mean that we've gotten more special? No, the needs of the students in the district have changed. So I think those are storylines that we all need to understand, both as a community and as a board, about what might be driving some of the costs. It's not solely enrollment, but student needs could be driving some of the costs as well. So that's my just cautionary piece to it, because I know there's an angst to get to that part, both from the community and obviously from the board, but really our process is a process, and really just want to go line by line so you can understand everything about it, and then we can talk about what can we afford, what can't we afford, and how do we want to do that. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's a...
I mean, that answers I think, right, the angst is the unknown of making sure it's not too late in the process for us to have time and react. I think, a component of it, which, having been through this as a leader, like, the budget process isn't, the timing is difficult in that we're budgeting now for next year when there's 4 months, whatever it is, left in the year, that we don't know how expense-wise the next 4 months are going to pan out, and we come back at the end of June when we know, and either, last couple years there's been money left over, doesn't mean there always is money left over, but it's the trick of this budget, is we have to approve a budget in April that's voted in May, when you really don't know your final end picture until June. So I think we have to have that conversation. That also need to know, like we did 2 or 3 years ago, when, I guess that was even August, there was money left over. That's the year we gave money back and levied less. But, so that's that. I think, again, I think we had this conversation last year. It was probably at the Saturday meeting we did this, but we don't have a meeting, our only meeting in the calendar after April 1st is the meeting where we're passing the budget, which I think just intuitively we know that can't work, because we're going to get some more state aid and we need to meet just to talk about what to do with it. So I think the sooner we get that meeting on the calendar, and I think we did it last year and said, let's set the meeting, and if somehow we don't need it, we cancel it, but it's better to have it on the calendar than not having a calendar. So
That's fair.
Right in the auditorium, have a 7-person panel or cabinet and board, and just let the community come speak, and we'll just listen for 2 or 3 hours, whatever, just let them speak. I think it's important we hear from the senior citizens on fixed incomes who can't afford a tax increase, or the business owners who have to make $40,000 in profit just to cover their tax bill before they even see a dollar. I think we need to go on a listening tour, and we need to have the community come here and give us their input, because it's for the children, yes, but it's also for the taxpayers. We need to find a delicate balance between the two. Make sure that the kids and the teachers and administrators get what they need, but also that the taxpayers can afford to continue to live here and businesses can continue to operate here. So my suggestion is, let's use the auditorium one night, bring the community out, let them speak. It's our job to listen. Oh, thank you.
Well, I do want to say thank you for that, but, we do have our board meetings, and we are listening to the community. So I really, it would be important to point that out for all the meetings that our superintendent and assistant superintendent of business have laid out for the community. And the all-day budget will be, I'm recommending that we videotape it this year, so others who have missed it can watch it on TV or watch it recorded. And I thank Trustee Melissa Banta for bringing that point up. And so I'm recommending that we videotape it this year.
Would there be a way during the meeting, if people wanted to watch it and then email in questions or concerns as we're going?
We don't do that for these meetings either. It'll be very difficult. Who would be, assessing the emails and coming up with the questions? I mean, typically we'd like the community members to come out. They can we do have emails that do come into the district where we do respond, and it takes some time, but it wouldn't be responding right on the spot. So if they want to email in some questions, we'll get back to them, because there will be questions from the board. It's I don't know if you were at the last budget meeting, the all-day meeting on Saturday last year or the years before, but it's a
2 years ago it was, yeah.
So it's a very long meeting, and that there's the board members and that are going to be asking questions. But anybody that has any questions, we get back to them.
Thank
It
you.
might not be live.
Here, I guess, Aaron, part of that, one of the issues with that is that this is meeting one of a 2-month process. So the community, we're having these meetings in public. We just got this this information we got, a week ago just to prepare for it, but we haven't as a board discussed the information. So whether it's the 151, we haven't as a board even figured out what we want the levy to be, what's included in the budget, what's not to include. So it's hard, the community needs to pay attention to this conversation to know what the conclusion is, to then know how to react. Now, the community, we got some community members here who, if you're here, you see the detail of what's in it, and then you kind of have a context of, again, I'm all, I'd love to cut our budget in half, but like like, it's easy to say that, but then you got to go line by line and say, what could I cut? So the most valuable people from the community are the ones that sit through the meetings and see what's in it, and they're like, oh, yeah, a psychologist, I understand that, I'm not going to question that. And yes, that costs money, versus the person who comes in and just says, just cut $1 million out of the levy, and I'm not going to tell you where to do it. Like, it's our job to figure, we have to figure, if you're going to cut something, where it comes. So the question is we don't vote as a board until April 20-something, whatever that meeting is, on the budget we want to put out. We take this version, we approve it as a board. So the question is, in a town hall kind of meeting, is what are you even telling the community? Because the board hasn't decided yet what we are, what we're going to put out to the community. So, do you, Lita, I think you might have created the Just Ask. Like, we have ways for people to email, come to meetings and say, if they want to say, I'm on fixed income and I can't afford an increase, there's ways for people to come tell us that, email it to us. So I don't want to dismiss the idea, but it's a tricky one, because you got to figure out when do you, where in the conversation do you put it? And I'm not sure
Right. And I also know that Dr. Sanchez and Alita Zuber are also presenting for the PTA and several other organizations that you present the budget to, and you get feedback there as well, which is very valuable feedback, because I know, for example, we've gotten emails regarding special education after-school programs, which we don't have any dedicated programs, which will cost money, and we need to consider that. And that's something that's very important. So there's a lot of community members that want to add things as well. So we have to balance that. So here's a great opportunity. Anybody's watching, we'll get an email if we do the next day or after that of anything that we talk about or any presentations, and we respond to it.
But that would be the point of the town hall, is you want to hear from everybody.
Well, that's just everybody comes. Everybody, go ahead.
So
Dr.
if I can suggest, let's get through Saturday, let's see where we're at, and then in turn we can continue our conversations around, not this Saturday, but the next Saturday, about what other forms of communication and feedback we can get from our community, hear from our community, those that are here, and then others that hopefully attend, future meetings. And if we don't feel like we have enough voice, then we'll find other ways to go, sometimes going out into the community, which we've done in the past, I've done personally, is one way, right? Because sometimes coming to the school is a challenge. Videotaping is the other place that we've tried to make sure that with accessibility. So I hear what the board and appreciate the importance of gathering feedback. It's critically important along the way, and I'm glad that people are very much, it seems like there's more of an interest in giving feedback potentially than in prior years. Not to say that individuals didn't care in the past, just saying that there's more of an interest in expressing some feedback. But I would really encourage us to just stay true to our process in terms of just getting through Saturday, and to Greg's point, then in turn, we can say, and even March 11th, and say, okay, well, where are we? How comfortable are we feeling? What kind of other information do we need to gather from our community? Because if we don't feel like we've gotten enough, then yeah, we should figure out if we've gotten enough feedback, if we feel comfortable with whatever said recommendation before the board adopts it. And certainly I appreciate what Greg said, when we look at the timeline, it's April 1st is when the budget gets approved, and then we don't meet, and then we got to get it adopted. So maybe we may want to consider something in between, so we can further the conversations around, okay, so this came in, what else might we want to give us a little bit extra time to dialogue about, hopefully, additional revenue from the state, hopefully.
The expenses in that code, and the reason why he didn't know is because Jim manages some of that code, and the expenses are from the supplies for the kiosks, the visitor kiosks. There's different supplies that actually Jim Minahan controls. So it's for the scholarship and the attendance kiosk and the visitor management system. That's where $22,000 is coming from. That's where the majority of the code is found.
Okay. Any more comments, or questions from the board? And I just want to thank, our cabinet and administration, and to Dr. Sanchez and Alita Zuber for putting this, process together, and for being transparent and sharing with all the community, all the meetings. And I see you're getting it out on social media. And I think it's a lot of work, and I'm really glad to see that we're continuing to do that year after year, to speak to the community. It's a big process, and it's one of our most important jobs that we do as board members and as a board together. So I want to thank you and thank the administration for that. We are now moving to public comment. Please come to the mic, say your name and your address. Okay, great. Mic's
I'm
on.
going to move a little closer. How's that?
Welcome.
Good evening. Dave Whitlinger, 207 Cedar Lane. So first, I'd like to also thank you all. Late night, you guys put in a lot of time and energy to developing a fantastic school district. I'm looking at this photo for the last hour. I just have to say, my son is, one of my sons is one of the graduates, if you will, of this fantastic special ed program. I was just talking to Maureen out in the hallway. He was intervened early on in first grade, got special services, and from now he's at fifth grade in a mainstream classroom that he is extremely proud that he worked his way up to, with all of the special support that got from the school district. And I can't thank you enough. And I think that that is like a testament to the hard work that the staff puts into this district, as well as the dedication to financing that, as we heard this evening. So it's the young lady there in front is a special young lady he's very attached to. Just had her birthday party with her. They're just great kids, and they get so great support from this district, and I can't thank you guys all enough. A couple of things. I've got working backwards. It does seem like it would be useful if the public was able to ask questions while the people are still here for the different chunks of the budget, so we could have interactivity. On the busing, it does seem like the software may not be doing what it is expected to be doing. We have some jokes in our neighborhood about the ice cream truck in the morning that goes back and forth the same bus stop multiple times before finally heading off to school. I think that's not uncommon. Granted, it's the first year, but it seems like something perhaps before the consultant goes off and does their job again, perhaps somebody should check to see what the garbage in before the garbage out comes. Something's not right, and it seems like it needs some oversight. As I said, I think the special ed program is fantastic, and if that did receive or a request for additional resources, I think that there would be a lot of support for that. Moving to the budget in general, I think Greg hit nail on the head with regards to there are structural things that it does seem like need to have conversations, and I'll walk through some of them, but it does seem like these are conversations that also should be facilitated with the public's input, and those should be facilitated conversations. The line by line is one way to look at a budget, but as any household knows, you can't just do a budget from the bottoms up and then say, here's how much money I wish I had. You have to start with how much money you have coming into the household as well. And as we've heard, we're kind of reaching the point where this community is getting, the wallet is feeling tapped out. The 1.15% that you've put out there as a preliminary budget for the vast majority of Ossinings's taxpayers with a $450,000 property, that's about $150, $200 more next year. Then over the course of 5 years, if you continue at that rate, that's about another $1,000. That's about $4,000 out of their budget, of course, across that 5-year period. That's a chunk of money. That also digs into whether they can afford after-school programs, whether they can afford Cub Scouts, whether they can afford Destination Imagination, whether they can afford swimming programs, basketball, whatever. Those are other things that are enriching our kids. We're taking money out of that. You know, there's, as we've said, there's a thing here where we're starting to have to look at how much money does the community have to spend as well. So let me ask a couple of things. From the process perspective, when we, the public, come and ask questions and bring issues to the table, where will they be accounted for, and how will they be kept track of, and how will there be a closed loop back to the public?
So if you were to bring up a comment to the board, then it's incumbent upon us to get back to you about that. So I would either personally or someone within the cabinet would get back to you to bring closure. With that said, if there's a theme to some of the conversations that we have, then it's likely that we would bring it up in the context of one of our board meetings related to the school district budget.
So how will these be kept track of? Will they be in the minutes? Will each of our issues be in the minutes
So
tonight?
Dave, can you give me an example?
Well, I just, like, we're starting a conversation now.
Right.
Like,
So, I mean, if you brought up an item for, there's a couple of things I just want to be clear on. If there's a clarifying question that you need related to the budget, is that what you're referring to and keeping track of? Or is it conversations, let's say, I'm just trying to get a sense of which,
yes, some of them
the
might be
types of questions that
clarifying
you're
of line
referring-
items. Some of them might be, here's a topic that we think
so
that.
line items, we normally get back to the individuals about and try to give some clarity on it. If it's more general, like, let's say there's a theme about, hey, is there if there's a way to get more after-school programming into this budget, then we would come back likely to the Board of Education along with the community and discuss what we could and couldn't do. But at the same time, if the individual, let's say it was yourself, weren't in attendance at the meeting, I'd make sure that you had that information so that you're clear on it.
So it just is a suggestion that, given that we're, you know, perhaps reaching a place where there's need for greater community dialogue, perhaps there is a mechanism for keeping track of these in the minutes and showing some closed loop to the issues that they're brought up.
There are times where we've developed frequently asked questions that individuals have asked and make sure we have some form of a document, but it's contingent on the time and, I mean, the contingent on how frequently questions are asked. So if there's a theme, we'll make sure that that information gets out to the community.
Right.
But duly noted, and we can talk about it.
Okay. Will the questions that'll be raised tonight, will they be captured in the minutes?
I don't, not normally. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to see how the issues might get closed and that they're not, you know, just lost and so forth.
Okay.
Okay. On the slide that's O-Prides, I was recognizing, you know, a lot of the great programs, and as my children are thankfully able to take advantage of these, just in lots of community conversations over the last several weeks, I've heard of programs being canceled, and I was wondering if there was a list of programs also that have been canceled over the last 3 years, and could that list be looked at? And what is the process for canceling a program?
What are the programs that, what are you hearing?
Math Circles was canceled, Elementary Orchestra was canceled, there were other after-school programs that were canceled. You know, and it just seems like that should be something that there's an accounting for somewhere, and why were they canceled, and what is the process? Is the board part of that approval process in canceling programs? How does the public know? It seemed like people were surprised these programs were canceled and were upset about it, to be frank.
Okay. So I would say that normally in those cases, we're going to be providing recommendations to the board during the budget process of programs that we may seek to reduce and/or enhance. So in the case of Math Circles.
Or
replace, right?
Yeah.
Whether numbers were low, like enrollment might be low, and
Yeah.
certainly there might be some students that are participating and families feel like it's a valuable program, but when we look at it, there might be only 3 students participating, so can we sustain it is a broader question. And it doesn't preclude us from like sort of starting it. Sometimes programs start small and then they grow. We realize that in a variety of classes and courses that we offer at the high school or various other entities throughout the district. But normally during the budget process, we are articulating what we're reducing and or is what we're going to choose not to offer for the following year. Now, if there are, I think there's a different type of conversation here is, are we communicating effectively might be something else that we need to really consider, and I'm hearing that part of it. So during the budget process, we try to very clearly articulate to the board and to the community what might be in and what might be out. But, and then thereafter, hopefully, we're communicating that effectively through our budget communication. And hopefully, we're letting families know of the impact of that thereafter.
So, I like to think I'm an attentive person. I've not recognized that in last budget cycles. As a community member, recognizing where I was told that something was going to be cut or given a choice of whether or not to cut this or that. I just don't remember. It might have happened and I didn't notice, but I have no recollection of that. Is that?
During the budget process, we've shared what we're in previous budget processes. We've talked about things that we're seeking to reduce. Now, again, and there's open dialogue around what that is. If you haven't attended a board meeting, then, and we haven't communicated, in fact, I'm hearing you in terms of that, but we have had broader conversations here at the board table related to programs that we may or may not be offering for a following year.
So if somebody were watching the board meetings and attentive to the board meetings, they would have known about these cuts.
My hope is the answer to that is yes. That would be, we want to work as transparently about programs that we're adding or decreasing along the way. For instance, let's use DI as an example. That's come up sometimes in conversations. That was never district budgeted. That was a program that was grant funded. So when the conversations came by of, well, can we sustain it or not, that was, you know, in terms of not being able to provide the funding, that wasn't anything that was even initially in the school district budget.
Sure.
So that's come to my attention sometimes from community members. The math circles was a number of years ago. I can't recall why that was reduced. But similarly, the individuals that, well, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and I don't know it because, you know, these are things that were brought to my attention. Yep. I would only offer that perhaps as part of the budget process that this was something that was illuminated. It seems like it would be difficult to maybe attend the meetings and be on top of, to know that your child's program that changed their life was on the chopping block and you needed to attend in order to speak up for it or something like that. I'm just supposing that, you know, maybe there'd be a one-pager of here are the changes of programs for this year to that year. If you want to comment on that, make sure you show up March 11th or whatever. There's, you know, more of a articulate way of getting the public to participate in what should or should not be in the budget next year when it comes to these kinds of programs. Because it does sound like people were surprised and or there were things that they thought were very important to their children that maybe they would want to have come and spoke up about if they had known that that was something that was up, you know. So it was a process suggestion.
Yeah, I guess my response to that is I also hope along the way that individuals that and were open to the feedback, if they didn't feel like there was communication, that they bring it to our attention. Like we're open to that, because knowing that, you know, if there's ways we can enhance our process, whether it's communication or anything else, we're always seeking that.
Yeah.
So I hear that. I hear what you're saying. I just haven't heard that as directly as maybe you have.
Right, right. Well, and yeah, okay. And the priorities for the year, second to the last, continuing our support of the 3-year plan. Could you comment on what the 3-year plan is? Is it a capital plan only, or is it a full 3-year budget plan?
It's a strategic plan of programs that we're looking at, whether we're seeking to review or potentially implement for future years. So it's just that, I guess, another way to frame it is a strategic plan.
And is that publicly published?
That's on our website.
Okay. And is it with numbers and data and so forth?
No, because as we're going through the strategic plan, I don't think it's fair to say that everything that's in there we're going to do. Sometimes we're exploring and piloting. And certainly if we're going to seek to recommend doing something, we come to the Board of Education during our budget process and/or during presentations throughout the year to say we're seeking to do this and would like to implement for the following year. So there isn't like a dollar assigned to each of them. It's work that, and some of them have no dollars cost also. So if you look at it, it's very, very detailed,
Oh, it's very detailed.
extremely detailed.
Okay. And is that, when the comptroller did the audit and recommended that there would be a 3-year plan, is that what is in response to that?
No. Most districts and organizations have a strategic plan.
Okay.
This is our strategic plan in terms of things that we want to look at over time in a continuous way. Also to be articulate with our staff in terms of things that we're looking at and might seek to implement year after year, i.e. we might look at a new writing program year 1. Year 2, we might look to seek a new reading program.
Yeah.
Year 3 might be mathematics. So that's the strategy associated with and the sequence that we might be looking at things. And also to articulate to the community says, when are you going to do a new math program? Well, year 3 is maybe when we're going to start looking at it. So it's a very transparent document, and again, detailed so that the community can understand what we're recommending.
Right. Okay. And is there a response to the request from the comptroller for a 3-year plan? That's not this, so is there?
This is totally separate.
Yeah. Has there been something that's been
speak
developed
to
to
I'm
respond
not
to
sure
that?
what you're referring to.
So I guess it was 2017, the comptroller did an audit?
Yeah, but
financial
I don't
audit?
remember them saying that there needed to be a 3-year plan. They made 3 recommendations, and we followed through on all the recommendations.
Yeah, so
And our
the
response
audit's,
is part of the report.
yeah, so the audit's available online, and it has 2 recommendations. One is that we were holding too much in reserves, and 2, that there be a 3-year financial plan such that it seems like it was in response to, such that we would not be holding on to reserves.
No, because during the audit, they actually requested a financial plan, and I provided it to them. But you can look at the response that we provided. Anything that we provided, like they asked us about the reserves, that year we put gave money back to the community. So the recommendations that they provided us with, we followed through on.
Okay.
So there's no further action that, in my mind, that needs to occur, but.
Okay,
the
I'll go back
response
and read it
is
again.
What the response is.
Yeah,
It's
I'll
in
go
the
back and read it
report.
again. It does mention a 3-year financial plan, and it did seem like that was in response to such that we're not in this position in the future. But I'll go back and read it again.
Hey,
Just to-
Dave, I just want to be cognizant of the other people in the community that might have comments tonight. So if you could wrap it up with your comments and questions, that would be great.
Okay, if
Yeah,
we're going to have
we're-
a community dialogue, I need some time.
Yeah, but we have other people in the community that may want to ask questions. So just know that
Okay,
want to be cognizant of the other community members.
sure. Okay,
I'm not talking about our time, I'm talking about the community members.
okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, did I hear? Thank you. So did I hear that the state aid on the revenue sources, that's what the number is that's in Cuomo's budget right now? And it seems like in most years we get more than that, after it goes through, the House and legislature session, they go back and forth. It just seems like there's usually more than what Cuomo puts in. He puts the lowball number in, and then the legislature argues for more. Is there a belief that any excess above this 26.7 would be applied to the taxpayers, that it would be given to taxpayer relief?
So I think the response to that is that I think what Greg had mentioned before is that I think we need to sit down and have conversations potentially when we had like March 11th was a date that we discussed potential and what we would do if we had additional revenue. So that hasn't been determined just yet.
Okay.
But clearly, you can see from the conversation that that's been brought up.
Right. Okay. And would that be a public conversation like this?
That's a public board meeting.
Yeah, every year that exact same conversation happens, and some years the extra money is used to fund something, and some years it's been given back to taxpayers, so. But
Right. Okay,
that's when it happens after April 1st.
okay.
We know it's coming.
So on the, I'm getting to the end. So on the reserves, this slide, it would be great to know what is the mechanism for determining how much should be in each one of these lines? How much should this be at? What is the maximum this should be at? What's the rationale? What's the formula? What's the mechanism for determining what that line should be at? And have we reached it? And how much, if we have reached it, let us know that, let the public know that. And how much is going into each of these line items in this year's coming budget? So if we're continuing to grow some of these line items, what's the rate that we're growing them?
There's law that speaks to what different reserves, what the capacity, what the maximum is. Right now, TRS, there's a maximum per year and over a period of time. Tax certs are basically, our auditors review it each year during the external audit process, and they determine whether or not the funding is appropriate. Just so you know, we don't fund 100% of what people are claiming. We fund between 20 and 30%. With regard to ERS, we did look at the budget and look at past history and see what the increases have been, and then make determinations from there. EBLAR, which is the benefits, we look at actual exposure from people, like we literally look at the amount of days that they have available, and we book those days based on their daily rate. So auditors look at that too. The capital reserve, the limit is $19 million. So we can go up to a maximum of $19 million, and it's up to $5 million per year. Unemployment is just based on previous history and whether or not we want to continue to budget unemployment or we want to use the reserve for that purpose. I think that's it. Is there another one?
Well, so the tax cert one, I think, is an interesting one for us to talk about and to see more information about. Looking at other school districts, they don't budget anywhere near this amount, and they don't have anywhere near this amount of reserve. What they look at is what's their run rate of how many things that they're having to pay out on a normal basis, and perhaps they'll look at a 3-year horizon of what any big bogeys might be out there. This is a large number, obviously. It's not something that a lot of other school districts that have looked at their budgets do. So it might be something for us to talk about and have a public dialogue about.
Number one, you can only budget a certain amount per year. So every year there's a certain amount based on the actual claims that come through. So every year there's an associated amount, so it's not like one big amount. And then you can only keep, technically, as long as the cases aren't closed, you can only keep, are still open, you can only keep up to 4 years. So the amount of money in there is up to 4 years in some instances. We have reduced it. Last year, we appropriated $1 million from the tax cert reserve, and every year we look at our exposure and we actually recycle the money within the reserve. So right now we know, based on the claims that we have about $3.5 million that we have to fund for this school year for the claims that we just received. So every year we analyze it, and again, we don't look at, okay, they requested this amount of money. We say, we think they're only going to get 20%. So that's what we budget. So I don't know what other schools do, but I think it's fiscally responsible to budget for this and prepare a reserve as opposed to borrowing and be surprised like other school districts that I know that I used to work for in Rockland County.
There's no question that nobody wants a surprise. I guess the question is based on historical data and perhaps looking 3 years out on what's being contested, is there anything that comes close to $17 million? Or is our burn rate closer to $5 million or $10 million or some other number?
Well, people didn't think that we would have claims based on a revaluation, but we do. And based on that information, we actually reduced, and speaking with Fernando, what we assume, based on the fact that the revaluation means that the assessed value is closer than what it was before. So it's more accurate. But we base it on the actual claims that we've received. And like I said, in future years, we book 20% of whatever the claim is.
So Aaron asked the
Dave,
question. Yeah.
I don't mind cutting you off on this
Yeah.
one. When I said to the group, we need a dedicated time to talk about revenues and reserves, these are the kind of things that we'll be talking about on March 11th.
Excellent.
So,
Yep,
yeah,
okay.
we'll have those questions.
Last one, it does seem like the capital plan and that capital, how much to save and retain in capital would be a great public conversation, facilitated public conversation, something where I think the public would enjoy participating in. You know, do we want to revamp this cafeteria? Do we want to resurface that gym? Do we want to participate in a new theater? Whatever. I think that would be a fantastic facilitated conversation. To that end, I can also say that the public, as you know, is very heightened about protecting this school and protecting the school district, and they turn out in numbers and with loud voices when new housing projects show up. And we love teaming up with the school district to make sure that the developers held accountable. To that end, the public is not interested in the school district taxing in order to facilitate a school expansion that would be in order to support housing, new housing development. I don't think that conversation should just happen here in this boardroom amongst a few. That should be a community conversation. And the alternative that many believe is much more suitable would be for the developers to have to pay for a school expansion. Now, I know that this is something where we cross municipal boundaries, where the town and village would have to be required to participate in that conversation in order to hold the developers accountable. I know, Ray, you've done, admirable job trying to squeeze more money out of each of those development projects as they show up. But we have to, I think, account for it's not in the public's best interest to continue to raise taxes in order to be able to afford a large expansion. The desire, I think, from the public would be, let's hold those developers accountable for that expansion if it's necessary for their housing projects. So I don't want to enter that into a
No, but
discussion.
I'm going to comment, Dave.
Okay.
So first of all, I think it's important to note that we are in ongoing conversations, and I think we need to even be more public with our public about the conversations we have our village and our town, and they're very aware of the needs of the school district. In fact, monthly I speak to our village manager about developments that are coming up and ideas that might be surfacing down the road. I understand, and I think the board completely understands, like when we're coming up with our fiscal plan, that once we have hopefully what I'll always frame as a semi-final draft, because even in a facility plans, it's iterative. A roof can go tomorrow, and then we got to edit, and we got to change whatever that might be. But we'd love to have feedback from the community when we have something more formal to present, and a fiscal plan associated with it too, because we've talked very carefully of not doing what you're referencing there, which is tax the taxpayers any further. This capital line is flat for just maintaining it, but we're hoping to address get as much as we can from space and programmatic needs associated with that, and try to do that over time as well.
Yep.
And then also when do we start leveraging the capital reserve that's there and the money that's been set aside, whether it's a bigger project that our budget can't cover and we need maybe some additional funds to help support it. That's the type of dialogue that we're having as a board, which I think is very aligned with what you're saying. But I need to publicly say that so that you understand, and everyone else watching clearly understands that as well. But I think it's really, really important to note, and we've had conversations with the village and the town about models that exist out there, similar to the one you're referencing about how do we get i.e. we've visited New Rochelle. They have a model,
Yep.
right? Whether that's the right model or not, we've talked about just recently about the comprehensive plan and how can some of these things be included within the context of that. So all that to say is, we're in ongoing conversations around that, and it's been very collaborative in nature. With that said, the development conversation is not directed here at the school district, but I would say that's directed somewhere else, meaning that you need to have those conversations with the village and the town. And certainly, the full picture and the gamut of like what that looks like and the impact on the schools should certainly be something, but I'm not responsible,
No
although I
question, Ray.
articulate the concerns.
No question.
Right, so regarding that.
No question, and trust me, the people, and many are on this with regards to attending town board meetings, fighting new developments, and village board meetings and fighting new developments with the schools in mind. That is the largest pressure point. What we haven't seen, and what could be possibly something that this board could do, is we haven't seen either of the municipalities step up to the plate and move forward on putting together a school expansion fund and legislating that with regards to what developers have to do in order to contribute to that for a school expansion. A letter from this school board to those municipalities requesting that would be a great step forward. It could be something that could come out of this budget cycle.
So what I would share with you is that you may recommend a letter. I feel like the ongoing communication, like it's those type of things are in motion. Clearly, we may want it tomorrow or yesterday, but those conversations are happening. So whether it calls for the board to write a formal letter, that's something the board can entertain. But I feel comfortable with the level of conversations that are taking place between the village and the town, and I mean that, sincerely, that I think there's really good conversations happening. In fact, to the point of, if development is going to happen, because I would not, again, I'm not a guessing person, but I'll guess in this case, something's going to happen, something's going to be developed, and what is good development and what's not good development. Those are conversations that we've also had, and I think we're talking more so about like how do we do that as a collaborative, and maybe even do some learning sessions with the community as well about what that's going to look like moving forward. So I understand your request for a letter, but I would also say feel comfortable in at least my statement that I feel good about the levels of dialogue that's happening between our town and village, and there's ongoing monthly dialogue and actually sometimes even bi-weekly discussions around what's happening, and development is a major topic that we're engaged in.
Okay. To be continued.
I just want to clarify, I'm looking at the audit report, and it doesn't say anything about a 3-year plan. What it says is formulate a plan for the use of excess unrestricted fund balance in the general fund in a manner that benefits district residents. Such uses include financing sources for funding, one-time expenditures, funding needed reserves, and reducing property taxes. So our response was, the district continues to fund necessary reserves with excess unrestricted fund balance, including a newly established capital reserve. The current unrestricted fund balance is 3.8% of the ensuing year's budget, which is below 4% at that time. Additionally, the district has reduced the tax levy for the 2017-18 school year. So that was our response, and our implementation date, is you have to put a date. The recommendation has been completed, so there's no other follow-up that has been required by the state. They just require you to do a plan, a response to their audit, and we responded, and there was no 3-year plan.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Wow, I don't realize how short I am, and now with Dave's height on this thing here. But my name is Roger Bhattacharya, so thank you very much for all the hard work that's been put into all of this. I see a room full of tired eyes. I promise not to belabor all my
And
questions.
just for the record, your address too?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I did, 16 Holbrook Road.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sorry, I'm that short. So, yeah, I just want to say, a lot of thought went into everything that's been done. And again, I want to commend everybody for all the hard work, and obviously there's a lot of hard work still ahead. I do have a question. I did notice that everybody has a detailed budget. When will that be made available to the public?
It'll be on the website on Friday.
By Friday? Okay, that's great. Is there, if I put in a request separately to have some comparable data year on year, is that possible to get hold of?
It depends on what you're...
So if I'm the detailed budget, if they're like line items specifically, is
So
there?
we can give you last year's budget book and this year's budget book. And
Okay,
you have to
and you'll
do
have
the
some sort of
comparisons.
actual...
It's actually on the website, the last year's budget. Well,
Right,
this
but I'm
year's
just saying
budget
if I had side-by-side comparison, is that possible to get?
Let me see your book.
It's in the budget book. So
Okay.
what was
I don't know
budgeted-
what's in this
Yeah,
book.
no,
Yeah,
so
so what was-
let me help you, Roger. When you get the book, it'll say what was currently budgeted in the 18-19 budget,
Okay.
the 19-20 budget,
Yeah.
and then the current expenses for this year.
Yep.
And what we're proposing, and then in turn, it says the change in budget. So you'll see where there's, zero, obviously, there was no change in that budget line, and then,
Great.
decreases and increases. So
Great.
if thereafter you feel like there's something else, then let us know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, great. No, that's good to know. Okay, that answered my question. Thank you. And just out of curiosity, though, in terms of, if you had to do any kind of big capital improvement, you had to take out any kind of bond, I'm just curious, what is our rating like? What's the school bond rating?
AA2.
Okay. And has that been changing on up towards, like,
Not
moving
since
towards a
I've-
AAA?
Not since I've been here.
Okay, so it's kind of been at that level for quite some time
Let me
then?
just make sure.
Okay. Because, I think that has an impact on our ability to borrow capital and what our interest rates would be if we had to borrow. Because I know, if you have like a AAA, you'd obviously have a preferred rate on
Right.
that. Okay, so just a couple other questions too. I noticed that there's a comment on, it's on the superintendent's budget presentation. Doesn't actually have a slide number, but actually says saving taxpayers money. There's a line in there, it says received millions in competitive grants through persuasive grant writing. How much is millions? I'm just curious on that's been received. And what more opportunities are there in the event that, there's like, a budget vote down and things just don't work that way? Are there opportunities to pursue more to kind of help
Yeah.
do the things that we need to do?
So we can get you an exact number. I don't have it in front
Okay.
of me, but just to give you a sense, I mean,
Yeah.
like estimating around this, like for instance, our pre-K grant gives us about $2 million.
I'm sorry, it was
$2 million
$2 million? Okay.
is just the pre-K grant.
Yep.
With that said, we are in continuous searches, for lack of a better word,
Yeah.
for funding.
Private funding as well?
But it's not as easy as we present it. And sometimes when the state or other entities present their requirements for organizations or their prerequisites for organizations to even qualify, sometimes we don't qualify. For example, we're not a high needs district per the state. So when you look at many of the grants on the state website, there are many, and I've had numerous very heated conversations with the state about this, that we don't even qualify for, but we want to pursue. But because we're not high needs, we can't. And
they determine what high needs are?
yeah, so part of it is your combined wealth ratio. Just to give you a sense, our combined wealth ratio, once we reach below 1, that's kind of qualifies you as a high needs. We're at 1.017, and 64% of our students are on free reduced lunch. To me, I view this as, let's I'm not sure that their metrics fully take into account what, I'm not sure my definition is totally aligned with the state's.
Yep.
I'll leave it that way. So we aren't always eligible to pursue it, but we're constantly looking. Just because I think it's important that we articulate it. We've, Ms. Zuber, or Ms. Sipos and I met with potential benefactors early in this year, presented unsuccessfully, unfortunate, but 9 o'clock in the morning, we were there in an office trying to present, opportunities to seek grants. After-school programming, we just received what's termed an Advantage Grant to provide extended opportunities or extended hours for our middle school, so more after-school programming. So there's a variety of things. We don't necessarily, I don't have the exact dollar, but it is multi-million in terms of what we do receive, but it doesn't preclude, we're constantly looking to see how we can leverage it. And if we can support something through a grant, albeit it might be a one-time, then we will. And if it helps us offset our budget, we do that as well. It's just hard, it's the same dialogue of like, let's get volunteers to help us. it's not always easy to get volunteers to come in and do work that you
It's not,
want
and
to,
I
right?
appreciate that, but it's also good to know. So, I mean,
Yep.
certainly I'll pursue any further discussions about it with you offline. The other question I had, so this was an interesting one around the solar, the solar panels that are going to go on the roof. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think the way to look at this is not so much, the trade-off between what it costs between New York Power Authority versus what it costs for solar, but I think it's kind of like a little bit more of sustainability and reducing our carbon footprint. That's something that this generation of students that are actually in the school, they're very well aware of. You guys hear it back at home. That's a really big thing to try to pursue. And I think that there's probably a lot of square footage between what could be the if you will, the angled covered parking lots or even the rooftops. So that is something it's worth pursuing, especially from what I heard, that it would be like a net zero cost to us. So that's something that it's worth to pursue. And I'd love to kind of just at some point, and it doesn't have to be tonight, just kind of understand a little bit more in terms of what is that square footage? Have we looked at that? What is that coverage? And what could that bring back to us? So,
Yeah, so let me just answer a little bit,
Sure.
and we can talk
Sure.
further. This is not a new conversation for the Board of Education. In fact, at one point, we even looked at, for lack of a better word, I think it would be referred to as a solar field over at the middle school and taking grounds in the back there. But the worry was, how much land would we be taking away for potential use later on? We've looked at it and gotten differences in opinion about whether we can put them on our roofs, because we have older roofs. So all that to say is that we've looked at all these and the
Sure.
potential savings associated with it, albeit we've had some, even some more recent conversations about the parking lot versions of the, and various others. So it's something I think we're all interested in doing. We just haven't gotten the right plan just yet to implement and recommend back, because we see and your point is a really important one. The savings is nice, but also the saving and what impact it has on our environment is also just as important, if not more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, great. Thank you very much for this, and certainly look forward to more active dialogue. And I think, as one of the comments you already addressed is looking at other ways of communicating. And if I think back to the Foundation Aid discussions, what was really great is when you and the Foundation Aid parents, they got together on Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. That's always a good, effective forum. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. And if that's one way to do it, great. But, I think definitely trying to get the word out. And I do think that it would be great to kind of have more seats to be able to fill. So when we actually have those discussions, you probably won't have enough seats to fill if it's going to be here. And the auditorium or other location could be a potential option if that is thought about. But again, I'm not looking for an answer on this, but I just want to support that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, any more public comments? Okay, we're moving right along to our regular meeting, business of the board. I'd like to take a motion to vote on resolutions 4.1 through 4.10.
So moved.
Second.
4.1, resolution to appoint additional consultants for the 2019-2020 school year. 4.2, resolution regarding an installment purchase agreement with Southern Westchester BOCES. 4.3, resolution to approve the minutes of the special meeting and executive session of January 8th, 2020. Resolution 4.4, resolution to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 22nd, 2020. 4.5, resolution to approve policy 5422, head lice policy, and policy 5420, student health services, as a first read. 4.6, resolution regarding the destruction of blank ballots. 4.7, resolution setting the dates of the annual budget, statutory hearing, and annual district budget vote and Board of Education elections. 4.8, resolution to approve a contract with the Westchester County Board of Elections. 4.9, resolution to approve Phoenix Graphics, Inc. as the official ballot printer. And 4.1 10.0, resolution to approve Eastside Movers, Inc. as the moving company for transporting the electronic scan voting machines. Any discussions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. Take a motion to approve Resolution 5.1, to vote on 5.1. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. 5.1, resolution to accept recommended placements. Any comments, conversations, suggestions? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Moving to regular meeting, business office matters. Take a motion to vote on Resolution 6.1 through 6.11.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, 6.1, resolution regarding certiorari refund payment from DCM Properties. Could you, Greg, would you read the dollar amount? I don't have it on my, does it, you guys have it quickly on your?
Not quickly,
24,690.61.
Yeah. $24,690.61.
Okay. 6.2, resolution regarding certiorari refund payment from Wells Fargo.
Hang on.
$39,018. $39,018.88.
6.3, resolution regarding certiorari refund payment for Plateau Associates.
$26,657.33.
6.4, resolution regarding certiorari refund payment from Deerfield Condominiums 1, 2, and 3.
$168,239.29.
6.5, resolution regarding acceptance of funds from the ExxonMobil Education Alliance. 6.9, resolution regarding increase in budget for the driver education program.
Lisa, that's
6.6.
6.6. You just said 6.9.
Did I say that 6 point, I'm upside down. 6.6, resolution regarding increase in budget driver education program. 6.7, resolution regarding increase in budget ACT testing service at OHS. 6.8, resolution regarding increase in budget send a kid to camp. 6.9, resolution regarding increase in budget Ohio Pile Prince donation, OHS. Resolution 6.10, resolution regarding cooperative bidding with Southern Westchester BOCES. And 6.11, resolution regarding interfund transfers. Any conversation? Any comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, moving to regular meeting personnel matters. I'd like to take a motion to vote on Resolution 7.2 through 7.15.
So moved.
Second.
7.2, resolution regarding creation of a civil service positions. 7.3, resolution regarding professional staff resignations. 7.4, resolution regarding civil service staff resignations. 7.5, resolution regarding support staff resignations. 7.6, resolution regarding professional staff appointments. 7.7, resolution regarding civil service staff appointments. 7.8, resolution regarding support staff appointments. 7.9, resolution regarding bus attendant appointments. 7.10, resolution regarding support staff appointments before and after school programs. 7.11, resolution regarding APPR, Annual Professional Performance Review Accountability. 7.12, resolution regarding per diem substitute removals. 7.13, resolution regarding per diem substitute appointments. 7.14, resolution regarding support staff request for a leave of absence. And 7.15, resolution regarding approval of school volunteers. Any comments? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Great. And audience recognition, another opportunity. Okay. And I'd like to move it to 10.1, board discussion, board dialogue, and any committees that have met. from the last time we met? Any more dialogue or any conversations?
We had the advocacy committee meeting last night. It was well attended. We had members of the Ossining for Fair Funding were there, as well as Portchester. A member of their school board was there. Melissa, I don't know if I said that. I'm too tired. I can't remember if I mentioned Melissa was there, but obviously Dr. Sanchez was there and Alita was there. And we had a good conversation about how to sort of finish out the advocacy season strong. We have some community outreach that's going to happen over the next few weeks, and then are planning a trip to Albany on March 26th. So everybody mark your calendars. Did I get everything? Anything you want to add, Melissa?
You want to talk about the fact that the ABC News got an Emmy nomination?
Take it away.
Oh, well, we found out last night at the meeting that ABC News was nominated for an Emmy for their coverage of the Harlem Suburban 5 last year. So that's epic.
It is. It's pretty
Is there any money attached with that?
Hey, maybe we'll all get to go up on
Still
stage if
video rights?
there's a win.
That's really neat. They probably got so much in terms of public response, which is good.
Well, you know, it is,
That's probably how they measure part of it.
if you're on Twitter, that story that they won or they were nominated for the Emmy is out there on Twitter. It's sort of a good time to push that in, the various people who need to hear it again. It's a good time to retweet that and comment and just make sure that it stays up there.
Just a couple real quick things. One, congratulations and thank you to Coach Ricky for another successful Pauline Ricky Memorial Scholarship Tournament. In memory of his mother, they raised a lot of money for scholarships for our students, and thank you to volunteer Risa Ross, lifelong resident graduate here, who actually raised over $1,000 in raffle tickets during said tournament. As one of the liaisons to the non-public schools, I just want to announce I will be going to St. Augustine's tomorrow to read the 4 different classes, the LORACs. So that's my only committee report.
You want to go?
Quick, we had a policy committee meeting. 2 of the policies that were in tonight, we talked about, there are 2 others that are coming. One is the DCA class credit policy at the high school that should be coming soon. And then have another version of we had our conversation here about the recognition policy, about recognizing student achievement, and I think we have another draft version that we have to review, but we had that discussion a little more.
All right, so I'm going to be, I know we're tired, it's late. I'm going to be quick. I wrote down what I wanted to say because I know it was going to be a late night, but we're at the end of Black History Month, and I just wanted to say, start off by saying tomorrow, Claremont and Roosevelt will be having their annual joint culmination of Black History Month celebration at Claremont School. I just want to thank all the administration and staff throughout the district who have continued to be innovative in the ways that they celebrate Black History Month throughout the month every year. I just want to give a quick remarks. I promise it'll literally be 5 minutes. I wrote it down and read it to make sure. So, as many of you might know, Katherine Johnson passed away on Monday. Often it's a somber moment when individuals transition, but Ms. Johnson lived a prosperous life of immeasurable contributions to society. As noted by a tribute on nasa.gov, upon graduating college, she began a teaching career at a public school in Virginia. She is most known for her career at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, working with NASA as an orbital mathematician on many projects, including her key contributions to the successful launch and return of NASA's first human spaceflight, also known as the 1961 Freedom 7 mission. Ms. Johnson also set precedence as the first woman credited with authoring a research report in the Flight Research Division. In 2015, at 97 years old, she would eventually receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama. As many already know, her story, along with that of mathematician Dorothy Vaughan, and engineer Mary Jackson were portrayed in the 2016 film Hidden Figures. It was around this time I just so happened to begin learning of the remarkable stories of some of Ossining residents, which I dubbed Ossining Hidden Figures. However, one in particular stood out to me. Her name was Hester Spencer Bateman Hines, a beloved phenom in the Ossining community and a descendant of Reverend Henry Dewars, who was the founding father of the Star of Bethlehem Church here in Ossining. In reference to an article published in 2013 in the Ossining Daily Voice, Ms. Hines moved to Ossining in 1941 after graduating college. 8 years later, she would become the first black teacher hired here in the Ossining district, teaching first grade at Park School. She would go on to have a 29-year-long career in the district, which led to her going on to teach all grade levels and eventually becoming assistant superintendent by the time she retired in 1978. Mrs. Hines' continued contribution to the larger Ossining community continued as a founder of the Community Action Program, also known as the CAP, serving as board of directors, as well as the president of the Ossining chapter of the NAACP and serving on the board for the Cooperative Scholarship Fund, which still to this day holds yearly fundraising events for students. She also served on the boards of the Mental Health Association of Westchester and Urban League of Westchester, ultimately being honored as Woman of the Year in 1969 by the Ossining Business and Professional Women's Club. In addition to all I've mentioned, one of Ms. Hines' most lasting contributions, particularly to the Ossining schools, was her relentless work to author and implement the Title I pre-K program here in the district. So as we close out another long meeting here tonight, crunching numbers, doing the math, while balancing our commitment to the school and broader Ossining community, I'm even more humbled by the stories of these two women, how they intersect with each other in our discussions here this evening and beyond. They are both educators at heart, one a mathematician, the other a fierce advocate, determined and passionate, no doubt themselves, dedicating countless hours to serve the greater good and leave this world a little better than they found it.
Thank you.
What time was the thing at Claremont?
6:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there is?
Just to add, and thank you for your remarks. There's a Black History Month event facilitated by My Brother's Keeper, Black Culture Club, and Prestigious Ladies of Power. That's taking place Friday evening, I think at 6:30 or Saturday, somewhere around there. I can get to that.
At the high school, right?
Here
Yeah.
at the high school. It's a little bit of a fundraiser for them too. I think it's like $10 or something that they're suggesting. But it'll be a good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, everybody. I'd like to, if there's no more comments, I'm going to take a motion to move into executive session. We don't need executive session. Sorry, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
I'm wired right now. I had that cup of coffee. Can you get a chair?
Yeah.
Good night.
My computer wasn't working.
That's okay.
Yeah, but that-
Given the time, especially with Ms. Hines,